Welcome, dear listeners, to the shadowed edges of nature's beauty, where crystal cascades hide sorrow, and the mist masks voices that should have long since faded. I'm your name, and tonight we wander through America's darkest waterfalls, waters that drown more than your gaze, where legends lurk behind every drop. In this journey, we'll tread trails of moonlit spray, gaze down into churning pools, and listen for the soft sighs of ghosts. Some of these tales come from Native American lore, some from frontier tragedies, and some from local whispers passed between campfires. Whether fully real or half-remembered, I invite you to suspend disbelief and let the water's murmur carry you deep into fear. So dim your lights, lean in close, and prepare your courage. Tonight, you'll visit 25 haunted waterfalls in the United States, places where nature as beauty has a dark side. Bridal Veil Fall in Yosemite National Park is among the most breathtaking natural wonders of California's Sierra Nevada. Dropping over 620 feet from a sheer granite precipice, it greets visitors at the entrance of Yosemite Valley with its constant mist and ethereal rainbows. But beneath its beauty lies a haunting legend, an ancient warning whispered through generations that tells of a spirit wind called Pohana. The legend says that this invisible force calls out to wanderers who come too close, luring them to the brink and pushing them into the void below. For centuries before Yosemite became a national park, the Awanichi people lived in this valley. They revered the land as sacred, believing each rock, river, and waterfall possessed its own spirit. Bridal Veil Fall, they said, was the dwelling of Pohono, the evil wind. To them, the mist rising from the base of the fall was more than spray, was the breath of the spirit itself. Visitors to the falls were warned never to stand too near the edge of the cliffs or to mock the voices carried by the wind. Those who ignored the warnings, the elders said, would hear a whisper so soft and so strange that it compelled them to step forward, right into the fatal pool of Pohono's power. The name Bridal Veil came later, given by early European settlers who saw the delicate mist drifting in the sunlight like the veil of a bride. But the settlers did not know, or perhaps did not believe, in the old stories of the Awanichi. To them, the fall was a symbol of romance, and Piartia, place where rainbows shimmered through the spray and sunlight danced on wet granite. Yet over time, stories began to circulate of hikers, explorers, and even photographers who ventured too close and slipped to their deaths. The legends of the native people began to echo through modern tragedy, as if Pohono's whispers still lingered among the roar of the water. Even today, visitors describe a strange sensation when approaching the falls. The path to the base is steep, narrow, and slick with mist. The air hums with the sound of falling water, and the temperature drops sharply as you near the base. Some say they feel disoriented, as if gravity itself shifts around them. Others report sudden gusts of wind that seem to come from nowhere, brief, but powerful enough to stagger even strong hikers. Park rangers often caution tourists not to get too close, not just because of slippery rocks, but because of unpredictable crosswinds that can appear without warning. It's easy to imagine why the Awanichi would have seen something supernatural in such a place. Standing there, you can feel how the waterfall seems alive, its roar constant, its mist clinging to skin, its wind swirling in sudden bursts, but in others, it rages with thunderous force, turning white with fury, as though the spirit within has been awakened. Local lore tells of travelers who vanished along the cliffs during early exploration of Yosemite Valley. One 19th century account spoke of a prospector who claimed to have heard a woman singing by the falls one evening, her voice rising and falling with the wind. When he approached, hoping to see who it was, the song abruptly stopped, and he was seized by a powerful gust that nearly threw him off balance. He returned to camp pale and shaken, saying he had looked into the mist and seen a figure in white, a woman with long flowing hair, beckoning him closer before dissolving into the spray. Some versions of the story say Pohono was once a spirit maiden, punished for jealousy or betrayal, doomed to remain forever near the falls. Others describe it as a malevolent force of nature itself, one that guards the sacred space from human intrusion. In both tales, the message remains the same: Respect the boundary between beauty and danger. Even scientific explanations can't quite erase the unease people feel there. Meteorologists note that the geography of the valley creates sudden pressure shifts, funneling gusts down through the narrow gorge. The fall's mist can refract sunlight to create ghostly optical illusions, faint figures or halos that appear and vanish in an instant. Psychologists say the combination of sound, motion, and vertigo can cause the mind to misinterpret sensory input, making people believe they've seen or heard something supernatural. Yet, even with all these rational answers, many visitors leave convinced that something deeper lingers at Brittlevale Falls, something that watches, listens, and waits. When the sun begins to set, the valley fills with long shadows, and the fall glows with a faint golden light. The air cools rapidly, and the roar of the water becomes sharper, almost metallic. It's at this hour, some say, that Pohono is most restless. A soft wind creeps along the base trail, swirling in slow circles. You might hear faint whispers, nothing distinct, just a sigh of air through trees, but the mind shapes them into voices, calling your name, urging you to take one more step forward. In winter, when the fall freezes into delicate cascades of ice, the legend feels even stronger. The mist becomes frost that clings to the rocks, and the wind whistles like a lament through the valley. Some nighttime visitors have claimed to hear cries echoing off the cliffs, though no one else is there. Others report seeing what looks like a translucent figure at the edge of the precipice, sometimes standing still, sometimes swaying gently like a woman's veil in the wind. Bridalveil Falls' paradox is that it embodies both beauty and peril. The same mist that creates its iconic rainbow also conceals its slippery danger. The same wind that cools the air can, in an instant, become a violent gust. To stand before it is to experience both awe and unease, the raw power of nature and the fragile balance between life and death. Perhaps that's why the legend of Pohono has endured. It reminds us that even in the world's most beautiful places, unseen forces command respect. In the modern world of safety rails and warning signs, the legend still holds a quiet power. Visitors lower their voices as they approach the viewpoint, feeling a sense of reverence that words can't fully explain. The wind still moves unpredictably, whispering across the cliffs as if carrying ancient warnings. And sometimes, when the sun strikes the mist just right and a rainbow forms across the fall, it feels as though the spirit of Pohono still watches over the valley, not merely as a threat, but as a reminder of nature's enduring mystery. In the quiet southern reaches of Yosemite National Park, far from the crowded viewpoints of Bridalveil and Yosemite Falls, lies a trail that climbs through whispering pines and granite stairways, the path to Chilnuala Falls. This lesser-known series of cascades, together plunging over 700 feet, is one of Yosemite's hidden masterpieces. The trail passes serene pools and rushing water before winding toward a place that locals speak of in hushed tones, Grouse Lake. It is there among the still waters and echoing canyons that an ancient legend lingers, the sorrowful story of a drowned boy whose spirit has never found peace, and the ghostly wind that lures those who listen too closely to their doom. The Awanaki people, the original inhabitants of the Yosemite Valley, revered every waterfall and glade as alive with spirit. To them, Chilnualna, whose name means leaping waters, was sacred. A place where the power of water and the whisper of wind were voices of the earth itself. But it was Grouse Lake that carried the most tragic of their legends. According to their stories, long ago a young boy wandered too close to the lake's edge and slipped into the icy depths. Despite desperate attempts to save him, the current pulled him down, and his body was never found. From that day on, the Awanaki believed his spirit remained trapped beneath the surface, calling out for help to anyone who would listen. The legend warns travelers that when they hear the sound of a child crying by the water, they must not approach. The voice, it is said, is not truly that of a boy, but the echo of his restless soul, or perhaps something older and darker, mimicking human sorrow to lure the living closer. Those who follow the cries too near the shore are seized by an invisible force, a cold wind that rises suddenly from the lake and pulls them under. The Awanaki called it the spirit wind, a presence born from the boundary between the living and the dead. It is said to move not just through Grouse Lake, but along the rushing path of Chilnuana Falls itself, riding on the spray and whispering through the trees. Hikers who walk the trail today can sense the strange duality of this place. The journey begins near Wawana, where sunlight filters softly through cedars and the sound of falling water fills the air. As the path climbs higher, the roar of Chilnuana Falls grows, shifting from a distant murmur to a thundering voice. The falls descend in stages, tumbling over granite ledges, then gathering into calm pools before plunging again. Mist rises like breath from the canyon, cooling the air and coating the rocks in a slippery sheen. It's easy to feel small here, surrounded by cliffs that seem to hum with quiet power. Those who know the old stories sometimes pause as they pass the lakes and pools. They say that on calm days, when the wind dies and the forest goes silent, you can hear faint sobbing carried on the breeze. The sound drifts across the water, never quite close enough to locate. Some hikers describe it as unmistakably human, the desperate wail of a child calling for his mother. Others insist it is only the wind moving through the pines, bending branches in a mournful rhythm. Yet, when they lean too far over the rocks to listen, a sudden gust often sweeps through, strong enough to make even the sure-footed stumble. Park rangers, while cautious about folklore, admit that Grouse Lake and the surrounding cliffs have claimed lives. The water is deceptively calm but bitterly cold, and the granite edges are slick with moss. Even a brief misstep can send someone tumbling into a current strong enough to pull them beneath the surface. They warn visitors to stay back, to respect the dangers hidden beneath Yosemite's beauty. But those who know the stories hear something more in those warnings, echoes of the Awanaki elders, repeating the same caution across the centuries. Do not answer the cries, and do not challenge the wind. There are countless modern tales from those who have hiked the trail. When he unzipped the flap, the air was utterly still, no ripples on the water, no wind through the trees. Then, without warning, a sudden blast of cold air rushed through the campsite, knocking over his lantern and extinguishing its flame. He left at dawn, pale and shaken, certain that he had heard the spirit of the drowned boy. Another hiker claimed to see a child standing knee-deep in the water at sunset, his head bowed, his form faint and wavering. When she called out, the figure lifted its face toward her, eyes wide, mouth open as if to speak, before dissolving into mist as a gust of wind rippled across the lake. Such sightings, though unverified, persist in whispers among rangers and locals alike. Some believe that the spirit wind is more than just a curse. To the Awanaki, it was a reminder of the sacred balance between life and death, a warning that the natural world must be respected, not conquered. Chilnuana's waters were powerful, cleansing, and alive. The wind that moved through them carried messages from the unseen world, testing the hearts of those who passed through its domain. Those who came with reverence were protected. Those who came in arrogance, seeking to claim or challenge nature, were drawn into its depths. As the sun lowers behind the mountains, the light fades from gold to deep blue. The forest becomes quiet except for the steady rush of falling water. If you stand near Grouse Lake at this hour, you might feel the air shift, a subtle change in pressure, as if the valley itself is holding its breath. Then, perhaps, you might hear it, a faint sob carried by the wind, rising and fading like a heartbeat. It is not loud, not frightening, more like a child's plea from far away. Most people turn back when they hear it. A few, drawn by curiosity or compassion, take a step closer. Those are the ones the legend warns about. No one knows exactly how many have vanished near these waters. Most are recorded as accidents, slips on the rocks, drownings, missteps. Yet for those who believe, the numbers tell a different story. They say the boy beneath the lake still calls out, not out of malice, but loneliness. And that Pohono-Eskin, the same spirit wind that haunts Bridal Veil Fall, moves through Chilnuana's canyons, searching for those who will listen. Deep within the Taconic Mountains, straddling the border of Massachusetts and New York, lies one of New England's most hauntingly beautiful places, Bash Bish Falls. Here, A narrow gorge funnels cold mountain water into a two-tiered cascade that plunges nearly 60 feet into a crystal pool below. The air is cool, even in summer. The rocks slick with mist, and the steady roar of falling water echoes off ancient stone walls. It is a place of remarkable beauty, but also of sorrow. For beneath the falls' hypnotic rhythm lingers a tragic legend, the story of a Mohican woman named Bash Bish, whose spirit, they say, still moves through the mist. The legend has been told in many ways, passed down through generations of settlers and indigenous people alike. The most common version begins long before the first colonists arrived, when the land was home to the Mohican people. In their village, there lived a young woman named Bash Bish, known for her grace and kindness. She often gathered herbs along the riverbanks and sang while she worked, her voice carrying softly through the forest. But beauty, even when innocent, can stir jealousy, and one day, Bash Bish was accused of betraying her husband's trust, though no proof was ever found. In the Mohican tradition, justice was swift but not always merciful. Her tribe's elders, convinced of her guilt, declared she must be purified by the spirits of the water. On the morning of her punishment, she was placed in a small canoe at the top of the falls. The villagers gathered silently along the cliffs, watching as the current carried her forward. Bash Bish did not cry out or struggle. Instead, she folded her hands and lifted her eyes to the sky. Moments later, the canoe tipped over the edge and vanished into the mist below. The water churned violently, and when it cleared, she was gone. Her body was never found. From that day on, strange things began to happen near the falls. The sound of the rushing water seemed to change with the wind, sometimes soft and melodic, other times sharp and mournful, as if the falls themselves were speaking. Hunters claimed they saw a figure moving along the rocks at dusk, a woman with flowing black hair and eyes that shone like moonlight on water. Travelers who camped nearby told of hearing whispers in the night, words carried by the mist that they could not quite understand. The people came to believe that Bash Bish's spirit had become one with the falls. Watching over the gorge she had been sacrificed to. As centuries passed, the story became part of the land's identity. Even after the Mohicans were displaced and settlers renamed the valleys, the legend persisted. The falls, which now bear Bash Bish's name, became a place of both beauty and unease. In the 19th century, visitors described it as sublime and terrible, a scene where the natural world seemed alive with unseen energy. Romantic painters and poets came to capture its wild grandeur, often noting how its mist veiled the rocks like a ghostly shroud. Local lore expanded upon the tragedy. Some said that Bash Bish had not truly died, but transformed her soul bound forever to the water. On quiet days, when sunlight filters through the trees, her reflection is said to appear in the pool below the falls, just beneath the surface. Those who gaze to long risk being drawn in, pulled by unseen currents, until they vanish beneath the spray. Others say her spirit mourns, not her own death, but that of her daughter, White Swan, who, according to a later version of the story, leaped from the same cliffs in grief after losing her mother. Whatever the truth, Bash Bish Falls has gained a somber reputation over the centuries. Beyond its legend, it has witnessed real tragedy. The cliffs surrounding the falls are steep, and the rocks below deceptively slick. Despite warnings, visitors have ventured too close, trying to capture the perfect photograph or glimpse the fabled ghostly figure, only to slip and fall to their deaths. The list of such accidents has grown long enough that rangers now warn visitors not to swim or climb near the falls at all. It is as though the place itself demands reverence, punishing those who treat it lightly. The environment adds to its mystique. Dense forest surrounds the gorge, muffling sound until the waterfall suddenly bursts into hearing, a rush like thunder between stone walls. The air smells of wet moss and pine. Mist hangs constantly over the pool, catching sunlight in pale rainbows. On overcast days, the atmosphere turns eerie, the rocks darken, the water turns silver gray, and shadows twist along the cliffs. In those moments, the mind easily slips into imagination. Many who have stood before Bash Bish Falls claim to feel watched, as if something ancient is aware of their presence. Hikers often speak of a sudden chill that runs through the air near the upper overlook, even on warm days. Some report a faint voice calling over the roar of the water, soft, melodic, and undeniably human. It always seems to come from the base of the falls, though no one is ever there. On still nights, when the moonlight filters through the gorge, witnesses have described seeing a pale figure drifting in the mist, moving gracefully, but never touching the ground. She appears near the same ledge from which the canoe once fell, her outline shimmering like water itself. Then, just as suddenly as she appears, she fades back into the spray. Skeptics explain these experiences as tricks of sound and light. The steep walls of the gorge create echoes that distort the noise of the falls, while moonlight, refracting through mist, can form illusions that resemble moving shapes. Psychologists note that the mind, when surrounded by isolation and sensory overload, often projects meaning into natural phenomena. Yet, even those who don't believe in ghosts admit that Bash Bish Falls feels different, charged with an emotion too tangible to dismiss. To stand before the falls is to sense the thin line between beauty and tragedy. The same forces that shaped its breathtaking cliffs also claimed lives and inspired legend. The water's endless descent seems to retell Bash Bish's story again and again, a cycle of loss and rebirth, of death turned to eternal motion. The roar of the cascade drowns out every other sound, yet within it, if one listens closely, there seems to be a rhythm, like a heartbeat, or a voice rising and falling in time with the water. Locals say that Bash Bish's spirit is not vengeful. Instead, she remains as guardian of the place, a reminder of the cost of injustice and the enduring power of memory. Her name, whispered by the falls that bear it, has become inseparable from the land. On misty mornings, when the gorge glows with the first light of dawn, her story lives again in the sighing of the water, in the drifting fog, in the haunting beauty of a place where sorrow became legend. Catskill Falls, cascading more than 260 feet through the rugged cliffs of the Catskill Mountains, is one of New York's most breathtaking natural landmarks. The waterfall descends in two sweeping tiers, a delicate upper drop, followed by a roaring plunge into a shadowed gorge below. Painters of the Hudson River School once immortalized its misty grandeur, and poets have long described it as a sacred meeting of stone, water, and sky. Yet for all its beauty and acclaim, Catskill Falls carries a quieter, stranger story, a legend that does not speak of a ghostly woman or ancient curse, but of a dog named Veet, whose spirit is said to still guard the falls. The tale begins in the early 19th century, when the Catskills were a wilderness of dense hemlock forests, narrow trails, and scattered homesteads. Artists, explorers, and travelers began to visit, drawn by the sublime scenery that would later define American Romanticism. Among these early wanderers was a man named Thomas Cole, founder of the Hudson River School, who often painted the falls and their surrounding cliffs. But alongside the artists came locals who lived and worked in the region, guiding visitors and tending to small inns. One of them, a reclusive trapper known as Jacob, is said to have lived not far from the gorge, accompanied by his loyal dog, Veet. Jacob and Veet were inseparable. Together they roamed the mountains, hunting in the thick woods and fishing in the streams that fed Catskill Creek. Villagers spoke fondly of the pair, the solitary man and his white shepherd, who could be seen from afar, bounding across boulders or standing like a statue beside his master at the edge of the falls. But one winter, when the mountains were locked in snow and ice, tragedy struck. Jacob went out to check his traps before an approaching storm and did not return. When several days passed with no sign of him, neighbors formed a search party. They followed Veet's tracks through the drifts until they reached the top of Catskill Falls. There, near the edge, they found the dog pacing back and forth, barking into the roar of the frozen cascade. When they called to him, he would not come. Instead, he ran toward the brink and howled. The men peered down and saw Jacob's body, half buried in snow and ice, below the first drop. The storm had come early, and he must have slipped while trying to make his way home. When they finally recovered the man's remains, Veet refused to leave the spot. He stayed by the falls for days, lying in the snow, howling each evening as the sun set behind the mountains. Locals tried to coax him away with food, but he would not take it. Eventually, when they returned again, the dog was gone. Some believed he had followed his master into death, that in grief and loyalty, he had leaped into the chasm to join him. Others claimed they saw him roaming the woods for months after, a silent white figure slipping through the trees before vanishing into the mist. Years passed, and the story might have faded into local memory if not for the strange sightings that followed. Travelers hiking to Catskill Falls began to report hearing faint barking near the upper ledge, even when no dog was in sight. Some described a soft whine carried on the wind, rising and falling with the rush of water. A few claimed to glimpse a white shape darting across the rocks, not quite solid, not quite mist, that vanished as soon as they approached. In the late 1800s, as tourism flourished and the Catskills became a retreat for city dwellers, guides began retelling the story of Veet to curious visitors. They said that on cold evenings, when fog drifts through the gorge and the last light fades from the cliffs, the ghost dog still keeps his vigil. Those who have lost their way in the dark sometimes hear his distant bark, leading them back to the trail, as if Veet's spirit has turned guardian over the falls that claimed his master. Skeptics dismiss the legend as mere folklore, a comforting story to explain the eerie sounds of wind and water echoing through the narrow canyon. Catskill Falls creates a natural amphitheater. The crash of the lower cascade reverberates off the stone, mingling with the rustle of trees to form strange, almost vocal tones. When the air is damp and cold, the mist can take on shapes that seem to move, phantom silhouettes formed by the interplay of spray and shadow. Yet even those who scoff at ghost stories admit that Catskill Falls feels alive, as if something unseen watches from the forest edge. The trail leading to the falls, though short, can be treacherous. Wet rock, loose gravel, and the dizzying height of the cliffs have caused numerous accidents over the years. Rangers constantly remind visitors to stay back from the edge. Perhaps that danger feeds the sense of haunting, the knowledge that beauty here is intertwined with peril. Each year, new hikers claim to have felt a sudden chill or heard a low growl in the mist just before stepping too close. Some believe that Veet's ghost still warns the living, as loyal in death as he was in life. On quiet mornings, when the sun rises through the Catskill valleys and the first light touches the spray, the falls appear almost otherworldly. The upper tier glows golden, the lower plunge turns silver, and a rainbow shimmers faintly at the base. It is in those moments that the legend feels most believable. A faint bark might echo across the water, too soft to be sure it was real. The mist curls in the shape of something moving 4 legs, perhaps, or just imagination playing tricks. And if you stand very still, you might feel a presence nearby, gentle but insistent, urging you to keep your footing, to stay safe. Writers have long been drawn to this place, not only for its beauty, but for its quiet sense of melancholy. Washington Irving himself visited the Catskills often and wrote of spirits haunting its peaks and valleys, echoes of a time when nature and myth were one. Catskill Falls seems to carry that same timeless feeling. Beneath its endless cascade, stories gather like stones at the water's edge, smoothed by time but never erased. Locals still leave offerings for Veet, a small toy, a dog biscuit, or a carved stone placed along the trail. They say it's a gesture of respect, not fear, but gratitude for a loyal heart that never abandoned its duty. Whether ghost or legend, Veet represents something deeply human, love that endures beyond death, devotion that no storm or fall can extinguish. In the quiet village of Indian Falls, New York, the sound of rushing water fills the air, echoing through the rocky gorge that holds Big Falls. The Tonawanda Creek tumbles here in a white, foaming curtain, a beautiful yet deceptively powerful force that has shaped the land for centuries. Travelers often stop to admire its beauty, especially when sunlight glints across the spray, turning the water to molten silver. Yet behind this tranquil scene lingers a haunting story, whispered by locals for generations. They say the falls are home to 2 restless spirits, a husband and wife bound forever by tragedy. Long ago, before the area became a quiet park and a stop for summer hikers, a young couple came to visit Big Falls. They were said to be newly married, perhaps on a trip to celebrate their future together. Accounts vary on when it happened. Some say the early 1900s, others place it in the mid-19th century, when the village was still known for its mills and taverns. But the details that matter remain the same. The husband wandered too close to the edge, lost his footing, and slipped into the surging water below. The force of the falls was unforgiving. Witnesses, if there were any, could do nothing as he disappeared beneath the current. Overcome with shock and grief, the young wife ran toward the edge, calling his name. According to legend, she didn't hesitate. Before anyone could stop her, she leaped after him, vanishing into the same churning waters that had claimed her love. Some stories claim her final scream echoed across the gorge for days, while others say a heavy silence fell over the place immediately after, as if nature itself paused in mourning. The bodies, so the story goes, were never recovered. The creek carried them away, lost among the twists and bends of the gorge. The falls, which had always been a source of beauty and power, gained a new reputation, one tinged with sorrow. Locals began to notice strange things near the water after that day. Some reported hearing faint cries just after sunset, especially when the mist thickened around the rocks. Others claimed to see a figure, or sometimes two, standing at the edge of the falls, only to fade into the spray when approached. At night, the sound of the rushing water seems to shift, carrying with it what some describe as distant weeping or the soft call of a woman's voice. Even when no one is near, there is the feeling of being watched, not with malice, but with sorrow. Campers who have stayed near the creek tell of sudden drops in temperature and the eerie sensation of someone brushing past them on the trail. The stories have become part of the area's folklore, passed down to children as both a love story and a warning that grief can be as dangerous as the falls themselves. Scientists and park historians dismiss the ghostly tales as imagination, the play of sound across rock walls, or the mind's tendency to find patterns in chaos. The cries, they say, are only the echoes of water striking stone, and the pale shapes seen in the mist are tricks of light. But those who live nearby are less certain. The same farmers, hikers, and anglers who frequent the falls claim that no mere echo could sound so human, nor any play of light move with such intent. On still evenings, when the sun sets behind the trees and the gorge fills with shadow, the legend feels alive. The air grows cooler, the roar of the water deepens, and for a fleeting moment one might imagine two forms in the mist, a man and a woman, hand in hand, forever poised at the brink. Some say they are trapped, doomed to relive their final moments again and again. Others prefer to think their spirits found peace in uniting, carried away together by the creek's eternal flow. Ghost Falls, also known as Lower Rainbow Falls or Green Falls, lies hidden deep within the Catskills of Greene County, New York. Nestled near the twisting course of Hellhole Creek, the waterfall is largely unknown outside of local hiking circles. Yet its very name carries a suggestion of something otherworldly. Unlike the more accessible and crowded cascades of the Catskills, Ghost Falls requires a deliberate trek along narrow, often overgrown trails. The path winds through thick stands of oak, maple, and hemlock, occasionally opening to rocky outcroppings where the sound of rushing water grows louder, hinting at the falls ahead. Visitors speak of a sudden hush in the forest just before they reach the cascade, as if the woods themselves are holding their breath. The waterfall is modest in size compared to other regional giants, but it possesses a quiet, commanding presence. Water tumbles over dark stones into a shallow pool, then continues along the creek, winding into shaded hollows where light barely penetrates the canopy. Mist rises gently from the falls, creating an ethereal haze that refracts the sunlight into faint rainbows when the day is clear. The combination of secluded terrain, dense forest, and the misty veil gives Ghost Falls a dreamlike quality, one that has fueled local legend for generations. Stories of spectral presence at the falls have circulated among Greene County residents for decades. The most persistent tale involves a dog named Veet, said to have been lost near the falls many years ago. According to the legend, the loyal animal refused to leave the water, and some versions claim that it drowned. Since that time, hikers and locals report seeing a shadowy canine figure darting along the edges of the pool or glimpsed through the mist. Those who have observed it describe a sense of unshakable familiarity, a presence that is comforting and unsettling at the same time. Some swear that the dog's eyes glimmer in the shadows, or that a soft bark echoes through the gorge when no other sound can be heard. The environment of Ghost Falls amplifies these uncanny experiences. The creek is narrow, bounded by steep, moss-covered banks that funnel sound unpredictably. The rush of water, combined with the echoing walls of the gorge, often produces whispers and hums, giving the impression that voices ride on the current. Leaves falling from the trees or rocks dislodged by water may create fleeting shadows that appear almost human. And the play of light through the mist can make the simplest shapes seem animated. Hikers report feeling watched, as if something unseen is observing from the shadows, vanishing when approached. The isolation of Ghost Falls contributes to the sense of mystery. Reaching the falls is not difficult for experienced hikers, but the remoteness ensures that few people are present at any given time. The forest is silent, except for the sounds of water and wind, and the deep hollows allow mist to linger long after the sun has passed overhead. This combination of factors, secluded terrain, unusual acoustics, and shifting mist, creates conditions ripe for perceptual anomalies, where the natural and the supernatural intertwine. Even the most skeptical visitors admit that the place feels charged, as if the falls themselves are aware of every step taken along the trail. Ghost Falls also holds a quieter, emotional resonance. The serene pool at the base of the falls reflects the surrounding forest like a mirror. While the spray and mist create a veil that softens the landscape, hikers often pause here, drawn not just by the beauty of the sight, but by the weight of the stories associated with it. Whether it is the loyal dog Veet, fleeting glimpses of shadows in the mist, or the soft murmurs carried on the wind, visitors leave with the sense that Ghost Falls is more than water over rock. It is a place where memory lingers, where the forest holds stories, and where the natural world and spectral legend merge seamlessly. Even in summer, when water levels are lower and sunlight penetrates the canopy, the falls maintain their ethereal presence. The mist, refracted light, and shifting shadows create an ever-changing display, ensuring that no two visits are the same. In autumn, the surrounding forest of reds, golds, and browns reflects in the pool, amplifying the sense of quiet wonder, while winter ice forms along the edges of the rocks, the frozen water sparkling like crystal, and giving the falls a still almost solemn atmosphere. Hidden within the Golden Hills of Butte County, California, lies a waterfall that exists as much in memory as in sight, Phantom Falls, also known as Coal Canyon Falls. It appears each spring like a secret returned, tumbling down the dark basalt walls of Coal Canyon in a white shimmering veil, only to vanish completely when summer comes. The locals call it Phantom for good reason. Its water is born from fleeting rains and melting snow, and when the dry season arrives, it disappears into nothing but wind and stone. Yet, according to legend, the name carries another meaning, one rooted not only in nature's impermanence, but in something far more spectral. The landscape itself sets the tone for mystery. Phantom Falls is part of North Table Mountain Ecological Reserve, a plateau carved from ancient lava flows that hardened millions of years ago. In spring, the land transforms into a painter's dream. Rolling meadows blanketed with poppies, lupins, and goldfields that stretch toward the horizon. Beneath this beauty, though, the earth is riddled with cracks, caves, and hidden ravines that seem to breathe their own quiet stories. One of those ravines is Coal Canyon, where the waterfall plunges more than 100 feet into a shadowed pool surrounded by black volcanic rock. Those who have hiked there know how suddenly the world changes near the falls. The open plateau gives way to steep edges and echoing silence. Even when the sun is bright above, the air grows noticeably cooler and heavier near the canyon's rim. Birds that once filled the sky fall quiet. The wind moves differently there, almost circular, as if the gorge were inhaling and exhaling. It's no wonder that locals began to believe the place was haunted. Stories of phantom falls date back long before the area was protected land. In the mid-1800s, during California's gold rush, settlers and miners pushed into the region, building small encampments near Table Mountain. One such mining operation was said to exist along Cold Canyon Creek. Life was hard, and many perished in accidents or from the unforgiving elements. According to one version of the legend, a young woman named Eleanor came to the camp searching for her husband, who had vanished after a flood destroyed their claim. Days of searching led her to the canyon, where she found only his pickaxe lodged in the mud near the brink. Overcome with grief, she was said to have stepped too close to the edge and vanished into the water below. Her body was never found. When the miners returned weeks later, the falls had already begun to dry up, leaving behind only damp rock and an eerie stillness. From that point on, they called it Phantom Falls, not only because the water disappeared with the season, but because some claimed to see Eleanor's figure wandering near the gorge when the rains returned each year. She appeared, they said, with the first surge of water and vanished when the last drops faded. Another version of the story, told by native families who lived in the area long before settlers arrived, speaks of the canyon as a place of transition, a threshold where spirits move between worlds. The Maidu people believed that waterfalls could act as doorways for those who had passed on. Their voices carried upward in the mist. According to that tradition, the phantom seen near Cold Canyon is not a single soul but many, the echoes of lives once bound to the land, returning briefly when water flows through the canyon. Modern hikers who make the long, hot trek to Phantom Falls sometimes leave with stories of their own. Some speak of hearing faint music beneath the roar of the water, like the distant hum of voices. Others describe a figure glimpsed in the mist, a woman in old-fashioned dress, or a pale shape moving against the black cliffs. A few have even reported the sensation of being watched from above while standing at the base of the falls, only to find no one on the rim when they look up. Rangers and geologists, of course, offer rational explanations. The echoing walls of the canyon can distort sound, making one's own footsteps or breathing seem to come from somewhere else. Shifting light and mist can create illusions, especially when sunlight refracts off spray in the late afternoon. But even they admit there's something uncanny about how alive the place feels, how it changes not just in season, but in mood. When the rains come in late winter, the dry creek bed awakens almost overnight. Water gathers from hidden channels in the basalt, feeding into the canyon until it bursts forth as a roaring column of white. For a few weeks, it is one of the most breathtaking sights in Northern California. Wild, remote, untouched by roads or rail, the water crashes into the dark pool below, sending up a constant plume of mist that clings to the canyon walls. Rainbows flicker in and out of existence like brief, bright ghosts. Then, as spring fades, the water begins to thin. By May or June, the once mighty fall dwindles to a mere trickle, then disappears entirely, leaving behind a scar of wet stone that glistens under the sun. The pool below recedes, its surface still and black, reflecting the empty cliff where water once flowed. It is in this silence, when the falls have vanished, that visitors say the haunting feels strongest. Some describe hearing the faint echo of rushing water when there is none, or catching a cold gust of air rising from the canyon despite the heat above. It's as if the memory of the waterfall refuses to fade, replaying itself again and again like an echo caught in time. To stand at the edge of Phantom Falls in midsummer is to confront absence itself. The air is heavy with heat, the basalt radiating warmth, and yet a strange chill lingers near the drop. The grasses sway in slow rhythm, and the world seems to quiet, as if waiting for something that never comes. Locals say that if you listen closely, you can still hear the sound of falling water, faint and rhythmic, as though the phantom of the falls is performing its eternal return, waiting for rain to bring it back to life. Each year, when the first storms sweep across the plateau and Cold Canyon fills again, the legend renews itself. The waterfall roars back to life, brilliant and alive, and those who visit early in the season sometimes claim to see a shape move through the mist, a fleeting silhouette at the edge of the spray, vanishing as quickly as the water itself. Hidden along the winding roads of the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee lies a place that is as beautiful as it is perilous, a swirling pocket of water known as the Sinks. The name itself feels appropriate, a place where the river seems to vanish into itself, spinning, roaring, and devouring everything that drifts too close. It is one of the park's most photographed waterfalls, yet beneath its restless surface lies a history carved by both human intervention and nature's relentless force. Long before the Sinks became a stop for visitors, the little river was a lifeline for early settlers and loggers. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the forests of the Smokies were stripped bare by timber operations. Logs were floated downstream toward nearby mills, using the river as both a highway and a hazard. Over time, jams would form massive tangles of pine and oak trunks wedged between the canyon walls, blocking the current and halting the flow of commerce. To the men who depended on the timber trade, such jams were costly delays. And so, one fateful day, they decided to solve the problem with dynamite. The explosion that followed was said to shake the mountains themselves. The force of it ripped through the jam, gouging deep into the rock below and carving out a swirling basin unlike anything else on the river. When the smoke cleared, what had once been a simple stretch of rapids had become something new, a deep, thunderous whirlpool, where water dropped and twisted through a jagged chute of stone. The little river no longer flowed gently through this part of the canyon. It plunged, twisted, and boiled. And from that day forward, the place was called the Sinks. At first, the loggers saw it as a success. The river was free once again. But it didn't take long for them to realize what they had created. The Sinks became a place of strange beauty and deadly power, a trap of swirling currents that hid unseen depths. The water plunged into a carved-out pool, spinning in slow, deceptive circles before shooting through narrow underwater passages. Anyone who entered the water found themselves caught in currents they could neither see nor fight. Even after the logging era ended and the Great Smoky Mountains became a national park, the legend of the Sinks continued to grow. Locals warned newcomers to stay away from the water, and with good reason. Over the decades, numerous swimmers, kayakers, and divers have been pulled beneath its surface, never to re-emerge. Rangers tell visitors that the undertow there is stronger than it looks. The whirlpool at the base of the falls leads into a network of underwater tunnels formed by the dynamite blast and years of erosion. Those who have ventured too close and survived speak of being yanked downward as if by unseen hands, their lungs burning as the river spins them through black water before releasing them downstream. The deaths, though tragic, have only deepened the Sinks' aura of mystery. Locals whisper that the spirits of those lost remain trapped beneath the surface, forever circling in the cold water. On quiet mornings, when mist hovers over the gorge and the roar of the falls turns into a low rumble, some claim to see pale shapes moving beneath the surface, forms that vanish when the sunlight touches them. Others have spoken of hearing muffled voices rising from the water, as if the river itself is whispering through the stone. It isn't hard to imagine ghosts lingering there. The Sinks feels different from the other waterfalls of the Smokies, wilder, more unpredictable. The air around it carries the scent of wet rock and pine, and the ground trembles slightly with the force of the water. The falls themselves are small in height, no more than 10 feet, but the pool below is massive and deep, ringed with slick, dark stone that glistens under the shifting light. The river seems alive, breathing through the canyon, drawing you in with its hypnotic rhythm. Many who visit describe an almost magnetic pull, an urge to move closer, to feel the spray, to touch the current. Rangers often say that's the danger. The Sinks appears deceptively calm from a distance. Families stop by to take pictures, hikers dip their feet into the shallows, and thrill-seekers stand too near the edge. Those who have watched accidents happen describe how quickly the current turns violent, how a person can vanish in an instant beneath the foam. For those who prefer to see the place safely, the Sinks remains a breathtaking sight. In spring, when the rains swell the little river, the falls thunder with life. churning up a white mist that rises high into the trees. In autumn, the surrounding forest blazes with color, and the water reflects the fiery hues of maples and oaks. Even in winter, when icicles hang from the canyon walls, the river still moves, a black ribbon cutting through a frozen world. Yet no matter the season, the feeling of power never fades. Some believe the land remembers what humans have done to it, that the violence of the dynamite blast left a mark not only on the stone, but on the spirit of the place. They say the Sphinx is a reminder of how easily beauty and danger intertwine, how the human urge to control nature often leads to chaos. Whether or not one believes in spirits, it's hard to stand before that dark, swirling water without feeling a deep respect, maybe even fear, for what lies beneath. Today, signs warn visitors not to swim or dive. Rangers patrol the area, reminding travelers of the tragedies that have occurred there. But still, people come. They stand at the railing, watching the endless rush of water, listening to the roar that fills the gorge. The Sphinx, after all, is mesmerizing, a place where motion never stops, where water seems to vanish into the earth itself. Yosemite Falls is a spectacle that commands awe. Plunging nearly 2,500 feet from the rim of Yosemite Valley, it is one of the tallest waterfalls in the world. A three-tiered cascade that dominates the landscape and shapes the rhythm of the valley below. Tourists flock from every corner of the globe to witness its power, to hear the thunder of falling water, to watch the mist rise into the sky and catch sunlight in rainbows. Yet beyond its breathtaking beauty, Yosemite Falls carries a history far older than the first European settlers, a history threaded with stories, warnings, and legends whispered by the people who have long called the valley home. The Awaneke, the Native American people of Yosemite Valley, have always regarded the falls with reverence. To them, the plunging water was more than just a natural wonder. It was a living force, a being that could be generous or cruel, depending on the respect it was shown. Some tales tell of spirits dwelling beneath the cascades, beings that watch the valley from hidden depths. These are not spirits of the friendly sort. They are guardians and arbiters, entities whose presence demands caution. Some stories describe malevolent spirits that dwell near the base of the falls, waiting for the unwary. Others speak of witches who once used the mist and echoes of the canyon to hide their movements, their powers intertwined with the relentless water. The very geography of Yosemite Falls contributes to its mystique. The upper falls drops 1,430 feet over granite cliffs, creating an unbroken curtain of water that plummets into a smaller pool before cascading another 675 feet in the middle falls. Finally, the lower falls drops 320 feet, feeding the Merced River. From above, the water appears both majestic and untouchable. But closer to the base, the roar of the falls becomes overwhelming. Mist fills the air, chilling the skin and soaking clothing. Sound bounces between the granite walls, creating echoes that can make it impossible to distinguish a shout from the wind or a footstep from a voice. It is here, near the pools and boulders at the base, that most tales take root. The Awaneke and later settlers claimed that anyone who lingered too long or tried to swim too close to the falling water risked more than injury. Some spoke of seeing figures in the spray, shadowy and human-shaped, but moving in unnatural ways, vanishing when approached. Hikers and adventurers sometimes report similar sightings today. A flicker at the corner of the eye, a shadow where there should be none, a whisper carried in the roar of the falls. In addition to spectral figures, legends tell of curses associated with Yosemite Falls. One story describes a young man who mocked the spirits, attempting to scale the cliff near Upper Falls to get a better view. As he climbed, he reportedly felt an invisible force pushing him back, and when he fell, he survived only because he tumbled into a shallow pool far below rather than the deeper chasm. The villagers said it was the spirit's warning. The falls are not a place to challenge, not a place to disregard the balance of nature. Others recount tales of witches who use the mist as a veil, hiding their rituals and curses. These stories often describe strange lights in the evenings, glowing orbs that float in the spray and vanish before anyone can reach them. The Awanaki believed these manifestations were the spirits of those who had angered the falls, trapped between the world of the living and the world of the spirits. To this day, visitors speak of sudden chills, inexplicable gusts, and a sense of being observed, even in the bright light of day. Despite these stories, Yosemite Falls remains a central attraction in the national park, drawing hikers, photographers, and nature enthusiasts. Trails like the Yosemite Falls Trail allow visitors to climb to the top of the lower falls and even reach the brink of the upper falls, providing spectacular views of the valley and the surrounding Sierra Nevada. Many who hike report a mixture of awe and unease. The sheer vertical drop of the cliffs, the relentless power of the water, and the echoes that seem to carry voices from another time. Scientists and park rangers often explain the eerie sensations as natural phenomena. The echoes and distortions of sound through the granite canyon, the wind swirling unpredictably near the cliffs, and the visual illusions created by mist and sunlight can all contribute to the sensation of ghostly presences. But those who have long lived in the valley, or who have spent time listening to the oral traditions of the Awanaki, argue that these explanations, while logical, do not capture the essence of the place. Yosemite Falls is not merely a waterfall. It is a place charged with history, memory, and power. In spring, when snowmelt swells the Merced River and the falls roar with full force, the canyon vibrates with energy. Water collides with rock, sending spray high into the air and forming temporary rainbows. At sunset, the cliffs glow red and gold, and the mist takes on a soft, ethereal quality. It is then that the stories feel most alive. The falls seem to whisper. The shadows stretch unnaturally long, and the air hums with the rhythm of falling water. Even today, some visitors feel compelled to honor the legends. Before approaching the base, they leave offerings of small stones or flowers, whispering thanks or prayers for safe passage. Others take photographs with a respectful distance, capturing the majesty of the falls while acknowledging that something unseen might be watching. The balance of fear and fascination has endured for centuries, bridging the gap between the physical and the spiritual. Cauldron Lynn, sometimes called Cauldron Lynn, is a waterfall of relentless power, a place where the Snake River reveals both its beauty and its danger. Located in southern Idaho, near the border of Twin Falls County, it is a narrow chute where the river plunges with furious energy into a rocky gorge. The waterfall is not high by global standards. The drop is modest compared to towering cascades in the Sierra Nevada or the Rockies. But what Cauldron Lynn lacks in height, it makes up for in intensity. The water churns and roars, swirling in foam, creating a natural cauldron that has fascinated and terrified people for centuries. The geology of Cauldron Lynn tells part of the story. The Snake River cut its course through basalt rock millions of years ago, creating layers of hard stone that have resisted erosion and shaped the river into dramatic rapids and falls. Over time, water has carved a narrow chute in this basalt, forcing the river through a confined channel where currents collide and twist violently. When the river is high in the spring, swollen by snowmelt from the surrounding mountains, the falls become a furious torrent, sending spray hundreds of feet into the air and filling the gorge with thunderous sound. On quieter days, the water appears to simmer, swirling in boiling circles that give the impression of a cauldron left to bubble endlessly. Early settlers and Native American tribes alike regarded Cauldron Lynn with a mix of reverence and caution. The Shoshone and Bannock peoples, who lived along the Snake River, called it a sacred place, warning that the waters were alive with spirits. They taught that the turbulent currents were more than natural. They were inhabited by forces that demanded respect. Anyone who tried to challenge the river's power risked being dragged into its depths. According to oral traditions, the whirlpools could pull a person under and carry them into unseen caves beneath the basalt, a realm of water spirits who never allowed their victims to return. European settlers who arrived in the region in the 19th century quickly learned to respect the power of Cauldron Lynn. Fur trappers, traders, and later miners noted the falls on their maps and warned others not to attempt swimming or boating near the chute. Despite these warnings, stories soon emerged of those who underestimated the river. One tale tells of a young trapper who tried to cross the falls on a small canoe during high water. Witnesses claimed he disappeared instantly in the churning foam, and though search parties scoured the river for miles, he was never seen again. Local lore suggests that his spirit now joins the restless waters, warning others of their own arrogance. The early 20th century brought more attempts to tame the river, with engineers and adventurers examining the site for irrigation, hydroelectric projects, and even recreation. Yet Cauldron Lynn resisted all interference. Every attempt to build near or control the falls was met with unexpected floods, washed-out structures, or accidents. The waterfall seems to exist on its own terms, a reminder that some natural forces are not to be conquered. People who have worked near the site speak of sudden surges in the water, even on calm days, and the swirling currents are so unpredictable that even small rocks can become dangerous projectiles. Modern visitors come to Cauldron Lynn both for its dramatic scenery and its reputation. The area is remote, accessible only by rugged trails that wind through sagebrush and rocky outcrops. Hikers and photographers describe a sense of awe when the falls finally come into view. From the edge of the basalt cliffs, the water appears as a roiling, silver cauldron. With foam rising in clouds and spray drifting across the rocks, the sound is deafening, a continuous roar that drowns out conversation and makes the ground itself feel alive. Many report a sensation of vibration in their feet, a subtle tremor from the energy of the water, as if the river itself is asserting its presence. The legend of the spirits remains strong, especially among locals. People speak of sudden chills near the falls, unexplained gusts of wind that seem to rise from the water, and faint whispers carried in the roar. Some hikers claim to have seen shapes moving beneath the surface, glimpses of figures that vanish when approached, or reflections that do not match the river's edge. Others report hearing cries, faint but human in tone, which echo off the basalt walls long after sunset. Whether these experiences are the result of imagination, the interplay of sound and light, or something more supernatural is left to the visitor's interpretation. One of the enduring qualities of Cauldron Lynn is its impermanence. Like a cauldron left to boil, the falls are never still. The currents twist, whirl, and collide in patterns that change from moment to moment. Seasonal water levels dramatically alter the character of the falls. In spring, snowmelt turns the river into a torrent capable of swallowing trees and boulders. By late summer, the water recedes, leaving deep pools and exposed basalt. But the whirlpools remain, dark and swirling, like traps waiting for the unwary. The very name Cauldron Lynn evokes this ceaseless motion, a place where the river simmers and churns endlessly. For those who respect the river, Cauldron Lynn is a place of profound beauty. Sunlight glinting off the foam creates fleeting rainbows, while the sound of the water forms a natural symphony that changes with wind and season. Wildlife thrives in the surrounding canyon. Deer drink from quieter pools upstream. Birds nest in cliff crevices, and eagles sometimes circle above, drawn to the energy of the falls. Yet all who come are reminded of the river's power, the potential for danger, and the stories that have grown from centuries of observation. Spectre Falls, hidden deep within the rugged expanse of Idaho's Salmon Chalet National Forest, is a waterfall shrouded in mystery, legend, and the hush of dense forest. Unlike the well-traveled waterfalls in the Pacific Northwest or Yosemite, Spectre Falls is seldom seen by casual hikers, and its location is often marked only in obscure guidebooks or whispered among locals who know the backcountry trails. The falls plunge into a narrow canyon, where moss-covered cliffs rise steeply and the sunlight struggles to reach the floor, giving the area an eerie twilight even on bright days. It is a place where the sound of rushing water dominates, where the air carries the cool scent of wet stone, and where stories of a lingering spirit have persisted for over a century. The legend begins in the late 1800s, during the height of Idaho's mining boom. Prospectors and small mining operations pushed into the remote canyons of the Salmon River watershed, seeking gold, silver, and other precious minerals hidden in the rugged terrain. Among these men was a miner named Thomas Grayson, a solitary figure known for his relentless determination and his obsession with a vein of ore that promised wealth but seemed forever elusive. According to local lore, Grayson struck out into the forest with little more than his tools and a rough map. Following the canyon upstream toward the sound of cascading water, it is said that he disappeared near the waterfall one summer, the circumstances unclear. Some accounts claim he fell into the churning pool at the base of the falls while attempting to cross the slick rocks. Others suggest a sudden rockslide swept him into the depths. Search parties found only traces of his camp and the tools he had left behind, scattered along the trail. The miners who had known him told stories of the waterfall's power and how it seemed to swallow everything that came near. They began to speak of a presence lingering in the mist, a shadow among the cliffs, and soon the place earned a new name: Spectre Falls. Since that time, hikers, hunters, and forest rangers have reported strange experiences near the falls. Many describe an unshakable feeling of being watched, even when alone. Footsteps echo where none should exist, and shadows appear to move independently of trees or rocks. Some claim to have heard the faint sound of a pickaxe striking stone, carried faintly through the roar of the waterfall, only to vanish when they investigate. Others speak of glimpsing a solitary figure, always just out of reach, silhouetted against a misty cascade. It is described as a man in a wide-brimmed hat, carrying a tool or lantern, standing silently on the edge of the pool, then disappearing when approached. The falls themselves are captivating and dangerous in equal measure. Spectre Falls plunges into a rocky basin, where the water churns violently before spilling downstream into a narrow creek. The canyon walls rise sharply on either side, coated in moss, ferns, and lichen, with twisted trees clinging to precarious ledges. In spring, the falls swell with snowmelt, creating a torrent that fills the canyon with a thunderous roar. By late summer, the flow diminishes, leaving only a trickle over the rocks. But the mist still rises in the same ghostly ribbons, creating illusions of movement among the shadows. The terrain adds to the sense of otherworldliness. Trails leading to the falls are narrow and rocky, often obstructed by fallen trees or washed-out sections. Hikers describe a strange disorientation as they approach, as if the canyon shifts subtly with every step. Light bends oddly among the cliffs, casting shadows that seem to extend beyond their sources. Even the sound of the waterfall changes depending on where one stands: a low, deep rumble in the pool, a higher-pitched hiss along the cliffs, creating an almost musical, hypnotic effect. It is in this interplay of light, sound, and terrain that many claim to sense the presence of Thomas Grayson, the miner who vanished more than 100 years ago. Some visitors have attempted to rationalize the reports. Forest rangers point out that the canyon's acoustics can distort sound, that wind and water create illusions, and that mossy shadows can appear as figures. Yet for those who have spent time alone near Spectre Falls, the experience feels far more tangible. Hikers speak of sudden chills that do not correspond to air temperature, or of brief glimpses of movement in the corner of their vision, only to find nothing upon looking directly. A few have photographed strange shapes in the mist, faint forms that cannot be explained by light or shadow alone. The falls continue to draw those fascinated by the supernatural, adventure seekers, and photographers in search of the perfect shot. Each journey into the canyon carries the dual sense of awe and caution. Awe at the waterfall, as sheer beauty and raw power, and caution because the terrain is unforgiving and because of the enduring stories of the miner's spirit. People speak of leaving small tokens near the edge of the falls, stones, notes, or trinkets, as gestures of respect for the spirit that may linger there. Whether these offerings are acknowledged by a ghost or merely serve to calm human fears is unknown. In every season, Spectre Falls has a unique character. In winter, icicles hang along the canyon walls, and the water slows to a frozen cascade, reflecting the low winter sun and sparkling fragments. Spring brings explosive energy, with snowmelt swelling the river into a white torrent. Summer's low flow exposes the jagged rocks beneath, and in autumn, the canyon is streaked with red, gold, and orange as the surrounding forest responds to the changing season. In each case, the falls seem to embody both permanence and impermanence, a reminder that life and death, presence and absence, are constantly in motion. Spectre Falls remains a destination for those willing to venture off the beaten path, a place where the natural world and the realm of legend intersect. The roar of the water, the shadows in the mist, and the tales of the miner's ghost create an atmosphere that is both thrilling and unnerving. Visitors often leave with stories of their own, glimpses of figures in the spray, faint sounds carried by the wind, and a lingering sense that the canyon has seen more than human eyes ever will. Whispering Falls, sometimes called Shadow Falls, is a secluded waterfall tucked deep within the Boise National Forest in Idaho, a place where sunlight filters through towering pines and firs, casting shifting shadows on moss-covered rocks. Unlike more accessible waterfalls, Whispering Falls is rarely visited by casual tourists. Reaching it requires a steep, winding trail that meanders along narrow ridges, crosses small creeks, and climbs over roots and boulders. The effort, however, is rewarded with a cascade that captivates the senses, water tumbling over layered granite into a pool below, surrounded by ferns, moss, and the dense, quiet forest. Yet it is not only the beauty of the waterfall that draws attention, it is the uncanny sounds that emerge from the spray sounds that locals have described as resembling whispered voices and the stories those whispers have inspired. The falls have been a part of local lore for generations. Early settlers and trappers in the Boise National Forest spoke of a waterfall that spoke to those who approached it. Native tribes, including the Shoshone and Bannock peoples, regarded the area as sacred. They believed the voices carried in the mist were not simply echoes of water, but spirits of the forest, communicating through a medium of sound and movement. According to their traditions, these spirits guarded the deep forest and the clear streams, warning travelers not to take more than they needed and to respect the land. Ignoring these warnings, they said, could lead one into danger. Missteps on hidden rocks, sudden slips into the pools, or even becoming hopelessly lost in the dense forest. The modern name, Whispering Falls, comes from this phenomenon. Visitors often report that the sound of the cascade is unlike any other waterfall in the region. From a distance, the water makes the usual roar, but as one approaches, the noise shifts subtly. The rush of water seems to carry syllables, soft hisses, and half-formed words that vanish when listened to directly. It is as though the falls themselves are speaking in a language just beyond comprehension. Hikers and campers describe moments when the mist rises so thick that visibility is reduced to a few feet, and the whispers seem to circle them, coming from all directions at once. Some insist the voices mimic human speech, sometimes friendly, sometimes pleading, and sometimes accusatory, while others hear nothing more than soft murmurs. The fall's geography enhances the mystery. Whispering Falls plunges roughly 50 feet into a rocky basin, where the water churns violently before continuing along a narrow creek. The surrounding canyon is steep, with cliffs covered in moss, ferns, and lichen. The narrow, twisting trail approaching the falls follows the contours of the canyon, and the dense canopy funnels sound in strange ways. Even the gentlest breeze carries the sound of the falls through the trees in unpredictable patterns. Hikers describe the forest as alive, responding to movement with sudden shifts in light and sound, creating the impression that the falls are communicating with those who enter the canyon. Local legend adds layers to the mystery. One story tells of a prospector named Eli Thatcher, who disappeared near the falls in the late 1800s while searching for gold. According to accounts passed down in the surrounding communities, Thatcher was drawn to the water by its unusual sounds. Witnesses claim that his final words were that the falls were calling him home when he did not return. Locals searched for weeks but found no trace. Since then, some say Thatcher's spirit lingers, joining the chorus of whispers in the mist. Others suggest that those who hear voices may be hearing warnings from the spirits of lost travelers, guiding the living away from the waterfall's hidden dangers. The falls themselves are deceptively tranquil. At low flow, the water slips quietly over the rock face, sparkling in sunlight and reflecting the green of the forest. Yet, even on calm days, the mist rises from the basin in a fine, almost imperceptible veil. Hikers describe the sensation of standing within this mist as entering a separate world. The air feels charged, almost electric, and the whispering intensifies. The combination of flowing water, echoing canyon walls, and dense foliage produces acoustics unlike anywhere else, creating natural auditory illusions that can seem both intimate and unsettling. Visitors report a variety of experiences. Some hear their own name called softly through the mist, while others swear they hear conversations, laughter, or crying from unseen sources. Occasionally, people glimpse shadowy figures moving just beyond the edge of vision, disappearing when looked at directly. Many leave offerings, small stones, feathers, or carved wood, as a gesture of respect to the spirits said to inhabit the canyon. Even those who are skeptical often admit to feeling a profound, almost spiritual presence, as if the waterfall itself is aware of each person who approaches. The falls are not without danger. The rocks around the basin are slick, and the canyon is steep. Stories of hikers losing footing or becoming trapped by sudden water surges are common. Local forest rangers warn that while the area is stunning, it requires careful navigation. Yet this danger adds to the mystique. Whispering Falls feels like a place where nature asserts both beauty and power simultaneously, a living entity that commands attention and respect. In every season, the waterfall takes on a distinct character. In spring, melting snow swells the creek, sending water surging over the falls in a roaring torrent. The mist rises higher, and the whispers become more pronounced, as if the spirits are more active when the falls are strongest. Summer brings gentler flow, but retains the illusion of voices, particularly in the early morning or late evening, when light and shadow play across the canyon. Autumn paints the forest in shades of gold and red, reflecting off the spray in fleeting rainbows, while winter freezes parts of the falls into jagged icicles, with the water whispering faintly beneath the ice. Whispering Falls is more than a waterfall. It is a place where the natural and supernatural seem to meet, where the sound of water carries echoes of the past, and where the forest itself seems to hold memory. Hikers leave changed, even if they do not speak of it, carrying with them the sensation of voices that are not their own, of shadows that linger in the corner of vision, and of the persistent impression that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Bash Bish Falls, straddling the border between Massachusetts and New York, is a waterfall steeped in legend and natural beauty. Nestled in the Taconic Range, the falls drop dramatically over jagged cliffs into a narrow gorge, creating one of the most photographed and visited cascades in the region. While the primary waterfall is the most renowned feature, the Bash Bish area contains a network of smaller side falls, hidden pools, and secluded streams, many of which are tied to folklore and alternate versions of the central legend. These lesser-known cascades contribute to the mystique of the site, creating a layered landscape where nature and story intertwine. The most widely told legend of Bash Bish Falls centers on a young Mohican woman named Bash Bish. According to the most common version, she was accused of adultery, a crime she did not commit, and as punishment, she was sent over the falls in a canoe. The story has a tragic conclusion. She disappears into the waters, never to be seen again. Her spirit, some say, lingers in the spray and mist of the falls, a restless presence drawn to those who approach too closely or disrespect the power of the place. Visitors often speak of feeling an inexplicable chill near the water's edge, an almost imperceptible sensation that someone is watching, or the sudden sound of movement in areas where no one else is present. Yet alongside this central narrative, alternative retellings paint a more complex picture of Bash Bish. Some local storytellers speak of her journey before the fatal plunge, describing hidden pools and side cascades that she is said to have visited. These smaller waterfalls, tucked away along the cliffs and connected by narrow streams, are often shrouded by dense foliage or fallen trees, making them easy to miss. In these secluded areas, the whispers of the forest are said to merge with the roar of the water. creating an environment where the boundary between the living and the spectral becomes blurred. According to some accounts, these pools are the resting places of Bish's spirit, where she lingers not in anger, but in sorrow and remembrance. One version of the legend tells of a young couple who followed Bish to these hidden falls, hoping to comfort or warn her. As they reached the first pool, they felt a sudden pull of the current, a force so strong it threatened to drag them under. Those who recount this story emphasize the danger of the smaller cascades, deceptively calm in appearance, yet unpredictable and fierce. Many of these side falls are shallow and wide, yet the water spins in circular eddies, creating a sense of movement beneath the surface that cannot be explained by the visible flow. Locals suggest that these currents are manifestations of Bish's sorrow, or perhaps protective energies meant to ward off intruders. Hikers and photographers have long documented these alternate locations. While most visitors remain on the main trail leading to the primary waterfall, the back trails wind into remote sections of the gorge, revealing lesser-known drops and pools. Some of these side cascades are barely a trickle during dry months, but in the spring or after heavy rains, they swell and become vigorous streams, cascading over mossy rocks into shadowed basins below. Here, the sound of the water is amplified by narrow canyon walls, producing echoes that some claim resemble whispers or even faint cries. For generations, storytellers have encouraged caution. The falls are beautiful, but they are not merely scenery. They are living elements of a legend that continues to unfold in every pool and every cascade. The terrain contributes to the haunting quality. The cliffs surrounding Bish Falls are steep and uneven, with jagged rock formations that create natural alcoves and shadowed recesses. Ferns, mosses, and lichens cling to damp surfaces, giving the impression of a forest alive with moisture and color. Trees arch over the streams, their roots exposed and winding along the cliffs, creating both obstacles and cover for visitors exploring off the main trail. In this setting, it is easy to imagine the spirit of Bish moving silently through the mist, gliding from one hidden cascade to another, her presence marked only by sudden gusts of wind or the ripple of water in a pool that should remain still. Several retellings emphasize the role of sound in the haunted landscape. The main fall produces a roar that can be heard from hundreds of feet away, but the side cascades and pools create a softer, more intimate auditory experience. Water trickles over stones, rushes through narrow chutes, and splashes into hidden basins, creating delicate rhythms that mingle with the wind through the trees. Local lore claims that the spirits respond to sound, that footsteps, voices, or even laughter can disturb the pools, eliciting a reaction in the form of sudden splashes or changes in the flow. Those who have experienced it often describe a sensation that the falls are aware of them, that the water itself communicates warnings or welcomes, depending on one's intentions. The seasonal changes add further layers to the legend. In early spring, when snowmelt swells both the main falls and the hidden cascades, the area feels alive with motion. Spray rises in clouds, creating rainbows in the sunlight, while the sound of rushing water drowns out other noises. In summer, lower flows expose rocks and ledges, making hidden pools more accessible but also more treacherous. Autumn transforms the surrounding forest into a tapestry of red, gold, and orange, reflected in the calm waters of the side cascades, producing an atmosphere of quiet reflection and melancholy. Winter brings ice to the cliffs, forming delicate frozen streams that drip and glimmer, echoing the frozen sorrow of the legend in crystalline form. While the mainstream narrative of Bish focuses on her tragic fate at the primary falls, these alternative versions and hidden features deepen the experience of the site. The lesser-known cascades, the remote pools, and the narrow trails all contribute to a sense that the falls are more than just a place of scenic beauty. They are a living memory, a landscape where history, legend, and natural power converge. The presence of the unseen, whether perceived as spirit, energy, or the echo of tragedy, makes Bish Falls a location that demands both respect and imagination. Visitors today can experience the falls in many ways, from a safe viewpoint on the main trail, from the swinging suspension bridges over side chasms, or by venturing into the hidden groves and remote cascades that form a network of smaller waterfalls. In every case, the combination of water, rock, forest, and story creates an experience that is equal parts awe and contemplation. The legend of Bash Bish, whether told in its most common form or through these alternative retellings, ensures that the falls remain a place where beauty, danger, and memory intertwine. Kootenai Falls, located on the Kootenai River in Lincoln County, Montana, is a place of breathtaking natural beauty, where the river plunges over rocky ledges and crashes into turbulent pools below. The falls have long been admired for their dramatic scenery, framed by towering evergreens and sheer cliffs that rise on either side of the canyon. Today, they are most widely recognized for the Kootenai Falls Swinging Bridge, a simple yet thrilling pedestrian bridge that spans the gorge and offers visitors a unique vantage point over the rushing water. But beyond the bridge and the scenic vistas, Kootenai Falls carries a quieter, older presence, a legacy of the river, the land, and the stories that have grown up around it over generations. The Kootenai River itself has shaped the landscape for millennia, fed by snowmelt from the Appalachian Mountains and winding its way north through Montana before turning west into Idaho. The river is a force of constant motion. At Kootenai Falls, the current is constricted by jagged basalt cliffs, forcing the water into a narrow chute that roars with incredible energy. The sound alone is mesmerizing, a deep, resonant rumble that can be heard from hundreds of feet away, mixing with the hiss of spray and the occasional crash of boulders dislodged by the relentless flow. The falls are not particularly high, roughly 60 feet, but the width of the river and the volume of water make them formidable. Standing at the edge, one feels both awe and an acute awareness of the raw power beneath. The falls are not only a geological wonder, but a place steeped in history. Long before settlers arrived, the Kootenai tribe inhabited the surrounding area, following the river and hunting in the dense forests of the Appalachian Mountains. For the tribe, the falls were sacred, a place where the power of water and rock converged in a tangible form. Oral traditions speak of the falls as a site where spirits dwelled, not malevolent, but guardians of the river who demanded respect. To approach the falls without reverence was considered unwise. The water itself could become unpredictable, currents stronger than expected, sudden whirlpools forming in the pools below. The tribe's warnings carried the weight of generations of observation, knowledge of the river's moods passed down in stories and teachings. With the arrival of European settlers and the subsequent logging and mining operations in the region, Kootenai Falls became a landmark on maps and an obstacle to be navigated. Logs were floated down the river, and the falls represented both a challenge and a danger. There are accounts from the early 1900s of loggers narrowly escaping injury while maneuvering near the falls, caught off guard by the sudden surges of water or the jagged rocks hidden beneath the churning surface. Some locals began to tell stories that hinted at more than natural danger, whispers of figures seen in the spray, shadows moving along the cliffs, and the sensation of being watched while near the river. Over time, these tales became entwined with the history of the Kootenai people, forming a tapestry of legend alongside the fall's physical majesty. The construction of the Kootenai Falls Swinging Bridge in recent decades has made the falls accessible to a wider audience. Visitors can now cross the narrow bridge and peer directly into the tumultuous waters below, feeling the structure sway slightly with each step. Photographers, hikers, and tourists are drawn to the dramatic perspectives the bridge affords, and it has become an iconic symbol of the falls. From this vantage point, the water is both mesmerizing and intimidating, a mix of white spray, dark currents, and the occasional glint of sunlight reflecting off the basalt. Even with thousands of people visiting each year, there is a sense of isolation at the falls, a feeling that the canyon and the river remained largely untamed. For those attuned to the more mysterious side of Kootenai Falls, the legends persist. Hikers often report sensations that cannot be explained by wind or water alone. A sudden chill, the feeling of a presence nearby, or fleeting shadows at the periphery of vision are commonly described. Some claim to hear faint voices carried in the spray, almost as if the river itself were whispering warnings or messages. Others describe glimpses of figures resembling early Kootenai tribe members or settlers, appearing momentarily along the cliffs or in the mist before vanishing. Whether these experiences are products of imagination heightened by the natural spectacle or echoes of some lingering presence is a question each visitor must answer for themselves. The canyon around Kootenai Falls enhances this sense of wonder. Towering cliffs frame the river, creating echoes that can carry sounds long distances. The forested slopes rise steeply on either side, funneling wind and water into strange patterns. Moss and ferns cling to the basalt, glistening in the spray, while small side streams feed into the main river, creating mini waterfalls that add texture to the landscape. Wildlife is abundant. Eagles and hawks soar overhead. Deer and elk move quietly through the trees, and otters play in calmer sections of the river. All of it contributes to a feeling that the falls are not merely scenery, but part of a living, breathing environment. Seasonal changes dramatically alter the fall's character. In spring, snowmelt swells the Kootenai River, sending torrents over the rocks with a thunderous roar that vibrates through the canyon. Summer brings lower water levels, and the falls appear gentler, but the currents remain strong and unpredictable. Autumn colors transform the surrounding forest into shades of gold, amber, and crimson, reflected in the dark pools of water below. Even in winter, when ice forms along the edges of the canyon, the water continues to flow, creating delicate icicles that hang from the cliffs, shimmering in sunlight and mist. Standing at Kootenai Falls, whether from the edge of the canyon or the swinging bridge, one cannot escape a sense of scale and history. The roar of the water is a constant reminder of nature's power, while the surrounding cliffs and forests speak of centuries of life, struggle, and reverence. Visitors today come to photograph, to hike, to feel the thrill of crossing the bridge, but the falls retain an intangible presence, a lingering sense that the land has witnessed countless stories, both human and natural, over generations. The Sinks, a dramatic waterfall on the Little River in Tennessee's Great Smoky Mountains, is known for its powerful, turbulent waters, formed decades ago when loggers dynamited a natural river jam to improve navigation. The cascade is physically imposing. The river plunges over jagged rocks into a deep pool, churning violently and sending spray high into the air. Its roar dominates the surrounding forest, and even from a distance, the sound is a low, rolling rumble that seems to resonate through the earth. But beyond the physical spectacle, the Sinks carries an eerie reputation, one that has persisted among locals, hikers, and folklore enthusiasts for generations. Many speak of what they call the ghostly currents, an intangible presence that seems to linger within the mist and the roar of the falls. The legend of the ghostly currents is tied inextricably to the fall's history. Over the years, the Sinks has been the site of numerous drownings, accidents, and near misses. The river's turbulence, combined with hidden rocks and unpredictable currents, has claimed lives, leaving behind a legacy of tragedy. Locals began to tell stories that the water itself retained memory of these events. The mist, they said, could take shapes that hinted at the presence of those who perished, fleeting shadows just beyond the eye's grasp, or the brief outline of a swimmer who vanished long ago. Witnesses often describe a sensation that the water is alive, watching, or even responding to human presence, as if the falls are aware of those who venture too close. On foggy mornings, the phenomena seem especially pronounced. Hikers and early risers report seeing forms in the spray, vague humanoid silhouettes that vanish when approached. Sometimes the mist appears to coalesce into something resembling a figure swimming in the pool, only to dissipate as one draws near. Others describe hearing soft sobbing carried on the roar of the falls, faint at first and then vanishing entirely. These experiences, difficult to explain through conventional means, have cemented the reputation of the Sinks as a haunted location. Many who encountered these ghostly currents describe a strange mixture of fear and awe, the sensation that one is standing at the threshold of a world where memory, grief, and nature intersect. The waterfall itself seems to amplify the sense of otherworldliness. The surrounding cliffs rise steeply on either side, covered in moss, ferns, and dense hardwood forest. The topography funnels sound, causing the roar to echo and swirl in unpredictable ways. Water collides with rock and eddies in turbulent pools, producing sudden sprays and whirlpools that appear and disappear without warning. These conditions create illusions that can trick the eye and ear. A shadow in the spray may be a sunlit mist. A sobbing sound may be wind passing through a hollowed log. Yet for those who have spent time at the falls, the repeated perception of figures or sounds gives weight to the belief that something unexplained is present. Part of the haunted character of the sinks arises from its isolation. While the area is accessible, the pool and surrounding cliffs are often visited alone or in small groups. Hikers recount moments when the noise of the falls seems to drown out all other sounds, creating a sense of separation from the world. In this quiet isolation, the mind is prone to perception shifts. Shapes emerge from the mist. Currents appear to move with intention, and fleeting movements in peripheral vision are interpreted as figures. Whether the ghosts are products of imagination, heightened by the environment, or residual energy from past tragedies, the experience is undeniably compelling. Local storytellers expand on these tales with specific incidents. One account describes a pair of hikers who watched as a faint figure appeared to swim against the current, struggling but making no progress. The outline shimmered in the mist and vanished when they tried to approach, leaving only ripples in the water. Another story tells of a fisherman who, on a fog-laden morning, saw a woman standing at the edge of the pool, her figure outlined in the spray, sobbing softly. When he shouted to her, the mist thickened, obscuring everything. By the time he reached the spot, no trace of the figure remained, and the water flowed undisturbed. Stories like these have passed through generations, blending memory, imagination, and the river's unpredictable power. The natural phenomena themselves contribute to the sense of haunting. The falls generate mist and spray that linger long after the river has passed, forming ephemeral clouds that drift through the canyon. Sunlight, shadows, and angles of observation can create shapes that resemble human forms. Sounds bounce off cliffs in unpredictable ways. A rockfall may sound like a cry, wind through trees like a whisper. At the sinks, these effects combine with the history of drownings and local legend, producing what many describe as a tangible presence. The falls seem to exist in two layers at once: the physical, observable cascade, and the intangible, spectral environment perceived by those who pay attention. Beyond the main falls, the surrounding river and forest hold smaller, unnamed cascades that have their own stories. In remote parts of the Appalachians, local lore speaks of haunted cascades, where fog rises from shallow pools and shadows appear in the spray. These sites are often accessible only by unmarked trails and are rarely visited. Yet hikers who encounter them describe experiences similar to those at the sinks: fleeting shapes, whispers in the mist, and a sense of being watched. These minor waterfalls contribute to the region's reputation for spectral water features, forming a network of hidden places where natural beauty and folklore merge. Seasonal changes amplify the eerie qualities of the sinks. Spring runoff increases the volume and turbulence of the falls, creating higher mist clouds and more dramatic currents. Summer brings calmer flows but retains the potential for optical illusions in sunlight-dappled spray. Autumn colors reflect in the water, enhancing the perception of movement and forms, while winter ice creates delicate, shifting patterns in the spray, producing the illusion of frozen figures within the falls. At every season, the interaction of light, water, and landscape encourages perception of forms that may not exist or may exist in ways beyond ordinary sight. The sinks remains a destination not only for hikers and photographers, but also for those drawn by its haunted reputation. Visitors often leave with stories of faces in the mist, soft cries in the roar, or glimpses of figures that vanish when approached. Whether these experiences are the result of imagination, environmental conditions, or lingering echoes of past tragedies, they form an integral part of the waterfall's identity. The ghostly currents of the sinks are a reminder that some places hold more than water. They carry memory, emotion, and the weight of history. Deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, tucked away in a forest so dense that sunlight struggles to pierce the canopy, there lies a waterfall known to locals only in whispers. It has no official name, appearing on few maps and hidden from casual travelers. Those who speak of it call it the Haunted Cascade, a place where nature's beauty and eerie legend collide in equal measure. The waterfall tumbles over Muscovite rocks into a dark, secluded pool, framed by cliffs shrouded in ferns and twisted roots. Its roar fills the hollow, yet it is the stillness in the surrounding woods, the way the air seems to pause in the mist, that gives the cascade an otherworldly quality. The legend begins with a bride, pale and radiant, who vanished on her wedding night. Accounts differ. Some say she was fleeing a forced marriage. Others insist she drowned accidentally, while a few claim foul play. Whatever the truth, her body was never recovered, and the local forest became forever linked with her absence. Over the decades, the tale evolved, carried in whispers around wood stoves, in late-night campfire stories, and by hikers daring to explore the Appalachian back. It is said that her spirit wanders the rocks during moonless nights, her wet dress clinging to her figure, trailing pale fingers through the water. Those who claim to have seen her describe a fleeting, almost translucent form, vanishing whenever approached, leaving only ripples and the chill of sudden air in her wake. The location itself contributes to the sense of haunting. The cascade lies in a deep hollow, with cliffs rising sharply on either side, covered in moss, lichen, and tangled roots. Trails leading to the falls are narrow and overgrown, often blocked by fallen trees or slick with mud. The forest muffles sound, creating an eerie silence broken only by the rush of water. Fog settles into the hollows, softening edges and creating shadows that seem to move independently. Visitors often report that when they step into the mist, the waterfall feels alive, not just water flowing, but something sentient, as though the cascade itself responds to human presence. Hikers and locals recount strange experiences along the trail. Some speak of hearing footsteps behind them, though no one follows. Others claim to hear soft sobbing or murmured voices carried faintly on the wind, words they cannot understand. The most common report is a glimpse of a pale figure along the rocks, a woman whose dress glistens in the moonlight, who pauses as if observing before vanishing into the spray. A few daring visitors have ventured close to the edge of the pool, only to find the water still and calm, betraying no hint of the apparition they had glimpsed. These accounts have fueled local superstition, warning outsiders to treat the area with respect, lest they be drawn into the same mysterious fate. The waterfall itself is deceptively powerful. While not particularly high, it tumbles over jagged stone into a narrow pool, creating a churning current beneath a seemingly calm surface. The rocks are slick, often hidden beneath layers of moss or fallen leaves, making the approach treacherous. Many believe the natural danger reinforces the legend, that the spirit's presence is intertwined with the perils of the terrain. Some storytellers claim that those who encounter the bride's spirit feel compelled to move carefully, as if the water guides their steps or warns of hidden danger beneath. Fog and moonlight transform the cascade in ways that amplify the haunting. On moonless nights, the mist seems to thicken, curling into ghostly shapes that cling to the cliffs and pool. The interplay of shadow and light, combined with the reflective surface of the water, creates fleeting illusions of movement. Rocks appear as faces, branches as outstretched hands, and ripples in the pool seem to mirror human forms. Many of the most persistent stories involve hikers seeing the pale bride among these illusions, standing silently before vanishing with the swirling mist. The sense of presence is heightened by the isolation of the location. The forest muffles voices, and the remoteness ensures that one is often entirely alone with the falls and its spectral inhabitant. Wildlife in the area adds another layer of tension. Owls call from hidden perches, their eyes glowing in the dark. Foxes and deer move quietly among the underbrush, occasionally startling the unprepared observer. The sounds of the forest, rustling leaves, snapping twigs, distant calls, combine with the roar of the cascade to create an environment where imagination is easily heightened. Hikers report that even familiar sounds take on an uncanny quality. A frog's croak becomes a whisper. A snapping branch resembles a footstep, and the wind through the trees carries the semblance of speech. In these conditions, the haunted cascade seems to exist in a liminal space between the natural and the supernatural. The legend persists precisely because of the forest's secrecy. The waterfall is on private land in some sections and lies deep within hollows that discourage casual exploration. Few photographs exist, and those that do often show only blurred outlines or misty forms. Stories passed down through generations are reinforced by the occasional modern sighting. A hiker glimpses a pale woman reflected in the water. A camper hears sobbing near the edge of the pool. A trail runner senses eyes following, then discovers only mist and rocks. Each retelling sustains the myth, giving it life beyond the physical waterfall itself. Seasonal changes affect the waterfall's atmosphere. In spring, the cascade swells with rainwater, mist rising high into the hollow, softening edges and obscuring the cliffs. Summer's lower flows reveal jagged rocks, making encounters with the spirit more direct. And autumn paints the surrounding forest in golds and reds, the fallen leaves creating fleeting flashes of color in the mist. Winter brings ice formations along the rocks, a crystal lattice that sparkles in dim light, reflecting shadows that seem more alive than ever. In each season, the waterfall continues to shape perception, amplifying the legend of the bride who vanished so long ago. The haunted cascade of the Appalachians remains a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary coexist. It is a location of natural beauty, danger, and enduring myth. Visitors leave with memories of rushing water, mist, and the fleeting glimpse of a pale figure. A reminder that some stories endure precisely because the places they inhabit resist complete understanding. The waterfall, unnamed yet unforgettable, carries within it a history of sorrow, mystery, and the quiet insistence that the past lingers in every ripple, every shadow, and every whisper of wind through the hollow. Deep in the mist-laden forests of the Pacific Northwest, far from highways and marked trails, there exists a waterfall whispered about among locals as Smoke Falls. Its true name is unknown, for it is so remote that few maps mark its location. The falls plunge over jagged rocks into a narrow, dark pool below, surrounded by dense firs, cedars, and moss-covered boulders. The air is perpetually damp and cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine needles. Mist rises from the cascade, curling into the forest like smoke, giving the waterfall its evocative nickname. Locals say that on certain days, particularly near dusk, the swirling mist seems almost alive, taking shapes that suggest fleeting figures or flickering lights, and they speak of phantom fires glimmering in the rocks along the fall's edge. The origin of these tales is rooted in tragedy. Decades ago, a lumberman met his end near the falls. Logging in the region was perilous. Unstable rocks, slick slopes, and heavy machinery made accidents all too common. On one fateful day, a rockslide buried him beneath tons of stone and timber. He was never recovered fully, and those who worked alongside him remember the forest falling silent that evening, as though it mourned him. Since that time, Smoke Falls has acquired a reputation among forest workers and locals as a place where the spirit of the lumberman lingers. Some claim that he is bound to the cascade, forever repeating the accident, a spectral reminder of the hazards of the trade. Visitors who have approached the falls report experiences that range from unsettling to inexplicable. The mist rising from the cascade seems unusually dense, curling into shapes that vanish when looked at directly. At dusk, some hikers and loggers describe lights flickering across the rocks, small and orange, like embers from a fire. Though no flames exist, shadows appear to move independently of trees or rocks, darting along the mossy boulders as though something unseen is pacing the edges of the water. Many claim to feel sudden drops in temperature near the pool, a chill that seems to seep into bones rather than skin. Others describe the sensation of being watched, a prickle of awareness that heightens as the fading light catches the fall's spray. The natural environment amplifies these phenomena. The The falls are framed by cliffs and steep ravines, creating echoes that make ordinary sounds, water, wind, snapping branches seem layered and otherworldly. Small caves and overhangs near the cascade trap mist and diffuse sound, producing effects that are disorienting to the ear. A rustle of leaves might echo as a whisper. A bird call might return as a mournful cry. In combination with the low light and shifting mist, the forest can appear populated with shapes and figures that vanish when approached. For those already aware of the local legend, the imagination easily completes the scene, overlaying shadows with the lumberman's presence, or turning light reflecting on wet rocks into flickering phantom fires. The story of Smoke Falls persists because it is shared orally among loggers, forest workers, and descendants of early settlers. The waterfall is spoken of in quiet tones, passed down from one generation to the next. Tales include sightings of shadow figures moving across the water's edge at dusk, flickering lights in the mist, and even subtle, unexplained sounds, a distant groan of wood snapping or stones shifting. Campfire stories recount loggers pausing at the edge of the falls, swearing they saw the lumberman's figure appear behind the mist, frozen for a heartbeat, then dissolving into the swirling vapor. Photographs taken by adventurous hikers rarely capture more than streaks of light or blurred shapes, which only reinforces the feeling that Smoke Falls exists on the boundary between the visible and the spectral. The falls themselves are modest in scale, but dramatic in appearance. Water tumbles in multiple tiers over jagged stone, collecting in a deep pool before continuing down a narrow creek that winds through the forest. Moss, lichen, and ferns cling to nearly every surface, and the thick canopy above filters light so that the area is permanently muted, even in daylight. The mist rising from the cascade can be thick enough to obscure footing, making the approach treacherous. Many visitors note that the forest around the falls seems older, quieter, and more attentive than other nearby groves, as if the trees themselves are custodians of memory. Seasonal changes influence the fall's eerie reputation. In spring, rainfall swells the cascade, sending mist higher into the trees and intensifying the smoke effect. Summer's lower flows reveal more rocks and cliffs, where the flickering lights and shadows are most frequently reported. Autumn brings fog-laden mornings that settle over the pool, softening edges and creating the perfect stage for fleeting illusions. In winter, ice and frost catch whatever little light penetrates the canopy, producing spectral reflections in the rocks and frozen spray. Each season enhances the sense that Smoke Falls is not simply water over stone, but a place where natural beauty and lingering memory converge. Cascading Echo Falls, nestled deep within the rugged terrain of the Ozark Mountains straddling Missouri and Arkansas, is a place where nature's beauty intersects with uncanny legend. Hidden among thick hardwood forests, winding creeks, and jagged limestone cliffs, the falls are modest in height compared to some of the region's larger waterfalls, but their dramatic acoustics make them a unique attraction. Water plunges over a series of moss-covered rocks into a secluded pool below, sending spray high into the air and filling the surrounding canyon with a constant, thunderous roar. Visitors are immediately struck not just by the visual appeal, but by the way sound behaves in this narrow, hollow. Voices travel oddly, bounce unpredictably off cliff walls, and sometimes return altered in ways that are difficult to explain. The name Cascading Echo Falls comes from this very phenomenon. Campers, hikers, and day visitors have long noticed that shouts, laughter, or even whispered words seem to return from the canyon differently than they were sent. Sometimes the echoes are layered. One voice returns in multiple versions, overlapped with softer murmurs, distant cries, or faint whimpering that seems entirely separate from the speaker. On occasion, visitors claim to hear a child's voice faintly singing or crying, even when no one else is present. Such occurrences have been enough to earn the falls a reputation as a haunted or spiritually charged place, a location where the natural world and human memory collide in strange, unsettling ways. Local lore offers an explanation for the phenomenon. Early in the settlement of the Ozarks, a child is said to have drowned in a backwater pool near the falls. The story varies depending on who tells it. Some say she slipped on wet rocks while playing. Others insist she was swept away in the current of an unusually strong spring runoff. Her body was recovered downstream, yet according to legend, her spirit never left the canyon. Campers and hikers tell of fleeting glimpses of a small figure near the pool, reflections in the water that disappear when approached, or of soft, plaintive singing carried on the mist. Many insist that the altered echoes, voices returning layered with distant cries, are evidence of her presence, a residual imprint of her final moments woven into the canyon's acoustics. The natural acoustics of the Ozark terrain certainly play a role in the phenomenon. The canyon walls surrounding the falls are steep and uneven, formed from weathered limestone and sandstone that reflect sound in unpredictable patterns. Small caves and overhangs amplify and distort voices, while the constant roar of water adds layers of white noise that obscure other sounds. Rocks jut at odd angles, creating pockets where sound reverberates and twists, producing echoes that can be mistaken for human voices or distant movement. Yet for those who spend time near the falls, the effect often transcends simple physics. Words can seem deliberate, pleading, or sorrowful, and the layering of sound can evoke the sensation that multiple presences are nearby. Campers frequently report unnerving experiences at Cascading Echo Falls. A group recounts shouting into the canyon, only to hear their own words return, interlaced with a soft sobbing they cannot place. Solo hikers describe hearing whispers in the mist that vanish when they turn toward the source, or the sound of small footsteps along rocks that are empty of life. Some visitors have recorded the waterfall on phones or handheld recorders, only to later find the playback layered with faint, unintelligible singing or murmuring. While natural acoustics can create strange echoes, these patterns are often more complex than expected, prompting many to wonder whether the falls are imprinted with more than just sound. The isolation of the area contributes to the falls' eerie reputation. Trails leading to Cascading Echo Falls wind through dense woods, often overgrown with ferns, briars, and fallen logs. The canyon is narrow and secluded, so visitors frequently encounter the sound of water without another human presence for hours. Wildlife, including owls, foxes, and raccoons, adds intermittent sounds, but these are familiar and predictable. It is the human-like echoes, layered, pleading, or sorrowful, that capture attention and imagination. Some hikers note that even the way light filters through the canopy enhances the uncanny effect. Shadows in the spray or reflected in the pool can appear like fleeting figures, merging with the sounds to create a sense of presence. Seasonal changes further shape the experience of Cascading Echo Falls. In spring, snowmelt and rain swell the stream, producing a louder, more chaotic cascade. The increased water volume amplifies mist and echoes, sometimes making whispered tones or overlapping voices more pronounced. Summer's lower flows reveal the rocks and small alcoves behind the cascade, places where shadows play tricks on the eye and echoes form in unexpected ways. Autumn colors reflect in the water, adding a surreal, almost painterly quality to the canyon, while winter's ice formations enhance sound distortion, creating a brittle, crystalline acoustic environment where even the softest whisper travels far. Despite its haunting reputation, Cascading Echo Falls remains a destination for those drawn to both natural beauty and the thrill of folklore. Visitors are captivated by the lush forests, cascading water, and secluded pools. But many leave with the sense that the falls hold something unseen, an imprint of past tragedy that continues to linger. Whether it is the echoing voice of the drowned child, the layered whispers that return from the canyon, or the mind's response to isolation and sound, the falls occupy a space where natural phenomenon and human legend converge. Silver Vale Falls, tucked away in the mist-shrouded forests of the Pacific Northwest, is a waterfall both beautiful and eerie. Hidden along a secluded stream in the region's dense evergreen woods, the cascade tumbles over moss-covered rock into a deep, shaded pool. The water flows with a gentle roar that fills the surrounding forest, blending with the whisper of wind through fir, cedar, and hemlock. Sunlight rarely penetrates the canopy in any direct way, leaving the falls often bathed in soft, silvery light that gives the area its evocative name. Local legend, however, suggests that the waterfall's beauty is inseparable from its haunting. It is said to conceal the restless spirit of a drowned bride. The story of the bride is told in hushed tones around nearby towns and at late-night campfires. According to the legend, she was washing her wedding gown in the pool beneath the falls when she slipped on the slick rocks and was swept away, vanishing without a trace. Some versions claim that she simply fell into the deep pool, while others suggest that she was entangled in the water's eddies and dragged under by the current. Her disappearance left an indelible mark on the forest, and over time, locals began to speak of glimpses of a pale figure in the mist, a shimmer of white that moves gracefully yet impossibly across the rocks and through the spray. It is said that on moonlit nights, the flowing water reflects her spectral dress, appearing as a fleeting, ethereal veil among the shadows. Visitors to Silver Vale Falls often speak of unusual sensations that accompany the legend. Many report sudden cold drafts along the trail even on warm days, a feeling that cannot be attributed to ordinary wind. Others describe a subtle pressure in the chest, difficulty breathing, or a sense of unease as they approach the pool. Hikers recount feeling watched, as if a presence moves in the mist or along the tree line. Some even claim that they have seen small, delicate flowers appear on stones near the pool, wildflowers that had not been there moments before. Locals sometimes interpret these blooms as silent tributes from unseen visitors or perhaps as offerings left by the spirit itself. The physical environment of the falls contributes to the haunting atmosphere. The pool is surrounded by jagged rocks and overhanging cliffs, all slick with moss and moisture. Mist from the cascade lingers long after the water has passed, forming low clouds that drift through the surrounding trees. The soft light filtering through the evergreen canopy casts shifting shadows, making shapes appear and disappear with the movement of the wind and spray. Reflections in the water can create illusions of human figures, especially at twilight or on moonlit nights. Even the sound of the falls itself seems amplified in the narrow hollow, echoing in ways that some visitors describe as whispering or crying. Over the years, hikers and adventurers have shared their encounters with Silver Vale Falls. One story describes a couple who came upon the pool at dusk, only to see a faint shimmer of white gliding along the rocks. When they stepped closer, the figure vanished, leaving behind a chill that hung in the air long after they left. Another account tells of a solo hiker who felt an almost imperceptible brush against her arm in the mist, followed by the appearance of a single wildflower on a rock that had been bare moments before. Some hikers take photographs, hoping to capture evidence, only to find that the images often appear blurred or distorted, with faint white shapes in the spray where none were visible to the eye. The legend also emphasizes caution. The rocks around the pool are notoriously slick, and the water can hide strong currents and submerged obstacles. Many locals have interpreted accidents near the falls as a continuation of the bride's story, reinforcing the idea that the waterfall is more than just a scenic destination. The combination of natural danger and spectral legend has led to a general respect for the site. Visitors are advised to tread carefully, to watch their step, and to leave offerings like small stones or flowers if they wish to honor the fallen bride. Seasonal changes intensify the fall's ethereal quality. In spring, runoff swells the cascade, creating powerful torrents that send mist high into the surrounding forest. Summer brings calmer flows, allowing the pool to reflect the filtered light and the subtle movements of the trees and mist. Autumn paints the surrounding forest in warm reds and golds, reflected in the silvery water, while winter ice forms delicate crystal patterns along rocks and branches, capturing fleeting rays of light that seem almost otherworldly. Each season offers a slightly different perspective on the falls, ensuring that every visit has its own sense of mystery. Beyond the physical environment, the legend of Silver Vale Falls continues to shape the experience of those who visit. The combination of mist, shadow, reflective water, and forest acoustics creates a setting in which the human mind is primed to perceive shapes, movement, and voices. Echoes of footsteps, soft water splashes, or sudden rustling in the trees can easily be interpreted as the bride's presence. Even those skeptical of the supernatural often report a feeling of awe, mixed with unease, a sense that the falls are not merely a natural formation, but a location where memory and legend converge. Moonlit Falls, tucked away in the dense forests of the upper Midwest, is a waterfall shrouded in legend and mystery. Situated somewhere in the wilds of Minnesota or northern Wisconsin, the falls remain largely unmarked on maps, known only to locals who tell stories passed down through generations. According to old folk tales, the cascade is unlike any ordinary waterfall. It flows visibly only under the light of a full moon. At other times, the rocky ledges and pools appear dry, and the forest around it is silent, as if the falls themselves are holding their breath. The secrecy of its location, combined with the ethereal spectacle, has made Moonlit Falls a source of fascination, fear, and quiet reverence. The legend associated with Moonlit Falls begins with a grief-stricken lover. Long ago, a young man of the region fell deeply in love, only to lose his beloved in tragic circumstances. Heartbroken, he returned nightly to the forest, carrying the memory of her laughter, her smile, and the tenderness they shared. Some versions of the story say he attempted to retrieve her from a river or lake where she had drowned. Others suggest he was consumed by sorrow and slowly wandered into the wilderness. Eventually, he disappeared entirely, leaving no trace except his devotion and the whispered stories that would become entwined with the forest itself. Locals say that the falls are animated by his longing. On full moon nights, the water flows again, glowing faintly in the silvery light, carrying the echoes of mourning and love that refuse to fade. Visitors who have sought out Moonlit Falls report experiences that blur the line between natural phenomena and spectral presence. Under a full moon, the waterfall seems to shimmer with an otherworldly glow, the water catching the moonlight in a way that gives the cascade a delicate, almost ethereal sheen. Mist rises gently from the base of the falls, curling into the trees and softening the edges of rocks and roots. It is in this veil of spray that many claim to see movement, the faint outline of a solitary figure, lingering behind the curtain of water, gazing into the pool below. Some insist they have heard the sound of soft sobbing or whispered words, carried faintly on the night air, while the rushing water itself seems quieter than expected, as if listening. The effect is subtle but undeniable, leaving witnesses with a sense of awe and unease. The natural environment of Moonlit Falls contributes heavily to the perceived haunting. The forest around it is dense and largely untouched, with towering pines, maples, and birches, forming a canopy that filters the moonlight into dappled silver patches on the forest floor. Fallen logs and moss-covered rocks line the approach, making every step cautious and deliberate. The narrow canyon that cradles the waterfall amplifies sound, and the echo of even a whisper can travel far, blending with the gentle roar of the cascade. Wind through the trees and rustling leaves create further auditory illusions, adding to the impression that voices, footsteps, or even unseen hands are moving through the forest. Many local tales emphasize the emotional resonance of Moonlit Falls. One story tells of a camper who arrived just as the full moon rose above the treetops. As the falls came to life with silvery light, he reported seeing the ghostly outline of a man standing behind the mist, gazing into the pool. Though the camper called out, the figure did not respond, and when he approached, the mist thickened, obscuring the view entirely. Other accounts tell of faint singing or the sound of footsteps on rocks that appear slick and treacherous, only to vanish when investigated. In every case, the falls are described as a place where grief lingers, where love and loss are inscribed upon the very landscape. The seasonal variations of the upper Midwest further enhanced the mystique of Moonlit Falls. In spring, snowmelt and rain swell the creek, creating a more vigorous cascade and sending mist higher into the air. Summer brings quieter flows and warmer nights, allowing visitors to linger longer. though the glow of the full moon makes the effect of the water more pronounced. Autumn paints the surrounding forest in fiery reds and golds, reflected in the shimmering water, while winter's snow and ice transform the falls into a frozen, crystalline spectacle, where moonlight glints off icicles and frost-covered rocks, amplifying the spectral impression. Each season offers a slightly different experience, but the legend remains constant. The falls awaken only under the full moon, a reminder of love lost and sorrow remembered. Part of the power of the tale lies in its subtlety. The falls are small, secluded, and largely unknown outside of local lore, yet the impact on those who visit is profound. The combination of natural beauty, the forest's isolation, and the legend of the grieving lover makes Moonlit Falls a place where imagination and perception converge. Visitors often leave with a heightened sense of the forest, acutely aware of shadows, sounds, and fleeting glimpses of movement. Even skeptics admit that the falls have a peculiar quality, a feeling that the forest itself is aware, that the water remembers, and that some part of the past continues to exist in the present. Deep in the shadowed forests of the Deep South, in the dense, moss-draped woods of Alabama, Georgia, or Louisiana, there is whispered a tale of a waterfall known only to locals as Devil's Drop. Few maps record its location, and those who know of it rarely speak aloud, for the legend carries a weighty warning. According to tradition, the devil himself once cursed the waters, condemning the falls as a place of danger and darkness. Those who approach too closely after nightfall are said to vanish into the shadows, leaving no trace but an echo of footsteps and the faint rustle of leaves. The waterfall is modest in height compared to some of the region's larger cascades, but it occupies a gorge so narrow and steep that the rocks appear almost to close in on anyone who ventures near. Mist rises from the water in thick, curling clouds, giving the falls a veil of silver that glows faintly under moonlight. Yet shadows deepen unnaturally among the trees and cliffs. Stories of devils drop vary across the Deep South, passed down by old settlers, hunters, and children daring each other to explore the forests. One tale tells of a man who, curious and foolish, approached the water one night to see if the stories were true. He was reportedly captivated by the way the moonlight shimmered across the falls, the mist curling and twisting like smoke, and the water gleaming like liquid obsidian. Then, as the legend goes, he noticed movement in the spray, to points of red light glowing like coals, following his steps. Before he could react, a shadow leaped from the gorge, swallowing him entirely. In the morning, locals found his footprints leading to the edge of the water, but none leading back. Only the whisper of the forest remained, as if the earth had remembered the devil's curse. Another variation of the story describes a woman who wandered the forest seeking solitude. Drawn by the sound of cascading water in the moonlight, she reported that the air grew suddenly heavy, and her lantern flickered and died. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, twisting along the rocks and into the hollows. Her last memory, she claimed, was seeing red eyes glint behind the veil of water, staring directly at her, and then feeling herself pulled forward by some unseen force. When search parties returned to the site days later, they found her shawl tangled in a tree and footprints that disappeared at the water's edge. Tales like this have fed the cautionary folklore, ensuring that Devil's Drop remains a place approached with trepidation. Those who venture near the falls often report odd occurrences even without seeing figures or red eyes. Footprints appear suddenly in the mud and sand along the banks, only to vanish moments later. Travelers speak of hearing distant footsteps behind them, echoing unnaturally in the narrow gorge, or of whispers carried on the wind that seem to respond to speech. Some hikers claim to feel cold drafts brushing against their skin, a chill entirely out of place in the humid southern night. The waterfall itself seems alive, with water that roars louder than the stream should, its mist twisting into shapes that suggest fleeting forms moving just beyond the veil. The natural features of the area enhance the eerie experience. The gorge surrounding Devil's Drop is steep, lined with jagged rocks and old, gnarled trees whose roots curl across the banks and cliff edges. Moss, ferns, and vines cling to nearly every surface, and the forest canopy above filters light into dim, shifting patterns, giving the impression of movement even when the wind is still. The falls drop into a deep pool where shadows linger, and the mist rising from the cascade often obscures the rocks below, creating the sense that one is peering into a liquid void. Even during the day, the forest is hushed, as though the trees themselves acknowledge the legend and maintain a solemn, watchful silence. Seasonal changes affect the atmosphere of Devil's Drop. In spring, heavy rains swell the creek, feeding the waterfall, sending the cascade roaring over the cliff with a mist that can rise above the tree line. Summer brings dense humidity, which thickens the air and carries sounds further, making every rustle and splash seem amplified. Autumn colors reflect on wet rocks and the water's surface, enhancing illusions of movement and shadow, while winter's sparse light creates longer shadows and deepening gloom among the cliffs and forest floor. No matter the season, the falls retain an aura of danger, and the stories persist, quietly warning against curiosity that oversteps caution. The legend of Devil's Drop is also tied to the landscape's isolation. The surrounding woods are thick and difficult to navigate, with trails often obscured by undergrowth, fallen logs, and winding creek beds. Few people wander here without guidance or local knowledge, which reinforces the idea that the falls are protected by the forest itself. Those who have lingered near the edge of the pool often speak of a sense of being watched, as if the shadows themselves track movement, shifting and twisting with an intelligence beyond human comprehension. Some insist that the very stones along the banks bear impressions of footsteps that appear only when someone is near, vanishing again without a trace, a spectral warning that the curse has not been lifted. Despite the danger implied by legend, Devil's Drop continues to captivate those drawn to mystery and the unknown. Hikers, photographers, and seekers of folklore are attracted by the idea of a waterfall where the natural world intersects with the spectral. The combination of cascading water, thick mist, flickering shadows, and the possibility of unseen eyes creates a compelling tension between awe and fear. Visitors often leave the site with a lingering impression of movement in the corners of their vision, of muffled sounds that cannot be explained, and of a place where legend and landscape have fused into something that feels alive. Tucked away among the rolling hills and dense forests of New England, there exist numerous small waterfalls that have long been the subjects of whispered tales. Among these, one legend recurs with chilling regularity, that of the Drowned Maid's Falls. These cascades are modest in size, seldom visited by tourists, and often hidden along winding paths or narrow forested lanes. Yet despite their unassuming appearance, they have earned a reputation among locals for being haunted. The story, passed down from generation to generation, tells of a young woman who once walked near the edge of a pool beneath a waterfall, slipped on slick rocks, and drowned. The accident was sudden, leaving no witnesses to her final moments, only the echoing roar of falling water. According to the legend, her presence did not depart with her body. Instead, locals say a pale figure in white sometimes emerges from the mist that rises from the pool, particularly at dusk or during rainstorms. The apparition is described as ethereal and silent, a delicate shape moving through the spray, gliding along the rocks, or pausing on the banks as though mourning her own untimely death. Some claim that if one watches long enough, the figure appears to weep, the outline of her form shaking in the fog like a reflection of sorrow frozen in time. Her appearance is fleeting. When approached, the maid vanishes into the mist, leaving only damp stones and the sound of water cascading over rock. One particularly well-known variant comes from Vermont, where a family recounted an encounter with the drowned maid's spirit. On a rainy evening, their children were playing near a waterfall, laughing and splashing along the edge of the pool. They later told their parents that they had seen a young woman standing behind the falls, her hair dark and wet, her dress glowing pale in the filtered light of the storm. According to the children, she was crying silently, tilting her head toward the water as though she were waiting for someone to notice her. Their parents dismissed the story at first, but the intensity of the children's fear and the detail in their description left an impression. Days later, small, wet footprints appeared along the bank where no one had walked, fading abruptly into the rocks and forest floor. The family's account has been retold many times in the region, becoming part of the lore that surrounds the hidden waterfalls of Vermont. The Drowned Maid's Falls are rarely marked on official maps, and many are accessible only by narrow footpaths through overgrown woods. The forest around these waterfalls is thick, with pine, oak, and birch trees arching overhead to create a natural canopy. Fallen leaves and moss cover the ground, making every step cautious. Rocks near the pools are slick with moisture and algae, often hidden beneath shallow layers of leaves. The combination of isolation, the roar of the water, and the whispering wind through the trees creates an atmosphere in which the imagination can run freely. Even those who do not believe in ghosts often find themselves pausing at the edge of the pool, half expecting to see movement among the mist. Seasonal variations heighten the eerie quality of the falls. In spring, runoff from melting snow swells the streams, creating more dramatic cascades and denser mist that clings to the surrounding forest. Summer brings longer days, but heavy rains and fog can obscure the paths and intensify shadows among the rocks. Autumn leaves reflect in the water, adding streaks of red, gold, and brown to the pale. Seen while winter ice and snow transform the waterfalls into frozen spectacles, the mist replaced by plain air that makes the forest feel still and solemn. Throughout the year, the presence of the Drowned Maid is said to be most visible when the weather is wet, when the air is heavy with moisture, and when the light is dim, allowing the illusion of the figure to emerge clearly from the surrounding mist. Visitors report more than mere sightings. Some speak of sudden chills when approaching the pool, a dampness in the air that feels almost deliberate, pressing down upon the chest. Others hear soft footsteps along the bank, or stones shifting in the mist, though no one is present. Occasionally, faint sobbing is heard beneath the rush of the water, delicate and fleeting, as if the maid herself is lamenting her lost life. For those who linger too long, the apparition seems aware, retreating just out of reach, yet always returning to the same spots. The edge of the pool, the crest of the waterfall, or among the rocks, where the water sprays most heavily. The Drowned Maid's Falls occupy a particular niche in New England folklore because of their intimate scale and personal resonance. Unlike grand tourist-accessible waterfalls, these hidden cascades create private encounters. Each legend is shaped by local memory, the personal retelling of a family, or the whispers of neighbors recounting tales around a fire. It is these small, intimate stories that form the lifeblood of haunted storytelling in the region. Terrifying not for spectacle, but for their closeness to everyday life, their ability to transform a simple walk in the woods into an encounter with something both beautiful and unsettling. Though the falls themselves may appear tranquil and scenic by day, their haunted reputation endures in the minds of those who know the stories. Hikers, families, and locals approach with a mix of awe and caution, aware that the mist may hide more than rocks, and that the past lingers stubbornly in the present. Even for those who do not see the figure, the knowledge of the legend colors the perception of the water, the spray, and the shadows, creating a landscape imbued with tension and memory. Deep within the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, tucked into the rugged terrain of the Cascade Range, lies a waterfall known to locals as Whispering Rock Falls. Its true name has long been forgotten, or perhaps intentionally hidden, as the falls are remote, accessible only by narrow, winding trails that vanish among moss-draped firs and cedars. The waterfall itself is modest in height, but its presence commands attention. Water cascades over layered rocks into a shallow, rocky pool, and the constant spray creates a veil of mist that clings to the surrounding forest. What sets Whispering Rock Falls apart is not its size or scenery, but the peculiar phenomena that have earned it a spectral reputation. Locals and hikers alike report moments when the falls seem to speak, the water whispering names or urgent warnings like "leave now" in the hush of the forest. The origin of these whispered tales is rooted in tragedy. Generations ago, according to oral tradition, A settler's daughter wandered too close to the falls one day and disappeared. Some say she slipped on slick rocks, tumbling into the rushing water. Others claim she was playing near the pool when she was swept away by an undercurrent that dragged her into a hidden cavern beneath the falls. Her body was never recovered, and the loss devastated her family and the small community nearby. Over time, locals began to tell stories that her spirit lingered on the mossy slopes, and in the mist, her voice swept into the water, blending with the roar of the cascade. Hikers and campers who have visited the site have sometimes sworn that they can hear a faint voice among the falls, a soft, melodic intonation calling out a name or uttering urgent advice to leave. Those who approach Whispering Rock Falls describe an atmosphere unlike any other in the region. The forest surrounding the waterfall is dense and shaded, with towering evergreens forming a natural canopy that filters sunlight into dappled green and silver patterns. Moss and ferns carpet the rocks and fallen logs, creating a soft, spongy terrain, while the edges of the trail drop sharply toward the cascade. The roar of the water is constant, but the shape of the canyon amplifies certain sounds in strange ways, allowing whispers carried by the wind to seem coherent. Visitors often feel a sudden chill near the pool, a damp cold that seems to settle in the chest, and some report hearing their own names called faintly, followed by a hissing suggestion to step back from the edge. The waterfall itself contributes to the ethereal quality of the place. Water spills over irregular rock formations, creating pockets of mist that drift in irregular patterns, sometimes thickening to obscure the falls entirely. Sunlight or moonlight caught in the mist can create shifting shadows that resemble human forms, which disappear when approached. These fleeting images, combined with the strange auditory phenomena, have convinced many visitors that Whispering Rock Falls is haunted. Some hikers claim they have seen a young woman in a white dress moving along the mossy banks, or just behind the veil of spray, vanishing whenever they attempt to approach her. Others report small signs of activity, smooth stones arranged unnaturally, faint footprints in damp soil, or droplets of water glistening in formations that seem deliberate. The legend persists because of its subtle and personal nature. Unlike grand tourist-accessible waterfalls, Whispering Rock Falls offers intimate encounters. The stories are passed quietly through local families, hiking forums, and word of mouth among backpackers familiar with the cascade's hidden corners. Hikers often recount the same types of experiences, the mist shifting as if to hide a presence, footsteps echoing on rocks when no one is there, whispers blending with the roar of the water. Some say the spirit is benevolent, warning intruders to avoid danger along slick rocks or hidden currents. Others interpret the phenomena as ominous, suggesting that the daughter remains restless, her sorrow entwined with the falls themselves. Seasonal changes amplify the mysterious qualities of the waterfall. In spring, snow melt swells the cascade, creating more mist that clings to the surrounding trees and rocks, making shadows and fleeting shapes appear more pronounced. Summer's lower flows allow sunlight to pierce the canopy, casting ethereal light through the spray and accentuating the sense of a hidden figure among the rocks. Autumn's foggy mornings enhance the impression that the falls are alive, whispering softly in the chill air. Even in winter, when ice forms along the edges of the pool and frost glitters across mossy stones, the falls retain an aura of solitude and quiet tension, as though the forest itself holds its breath in anticipation of some unseen presence. Many hikers report psychological effects that reinforce the legend. Time seems distorted near the falls, minutes feel like hours, and the repetition of water and whispering creates a trance-like atmosphere. The mind, alert to subtle patterns in sound and movement, can interpret natural phenomena, a flicker of light, a branch swaying in the wind, echoes bouncing from cliff walls, as evidence of the spirit's presence. Even skeptics admit that the waterfall has a peculiar quality, a sense that the forest is aware that something unseen is monitoring the edges of the pool, and that the stories may be grounded in more than mere imagination. Deep in the remote backcountry of the Rocky Mountains, in Colorado and Montana, there lies a waterfall that few hikers or climbers have ever seen, and even fewer speak of openly. Locals and mountain guides whisper its name as Spectral Cascade, a waterfall hidden in narrow glacial valleys where jagged peaks rise sharply and snow lingers well into late autumn. Its location is difficult to reach, accessible only by rugged trails that wind along sheer cliffs and cross unstable talus slopes. The falls themselves are not the tallest in the Rockies, but the combination of glacial runoff, rocky ledges, and swirling mist creates an atmosphere both awe-inspiring and unnerving. Spectral Cascade has earned its name from the peculiar phenomena reported by those who have ventured close. In the spray of the falls, a ghostly shimmer sometimes appears, as if a figure walks the narrow ledge behind the falling water, fading in and out of view. The legend of Spectral Cascade is rooted in tragedy, though the details vary depending on who tells the story. One account speaks of a mountaineer attempting to summit a nearby peak late in the season, misjudging the slick ice and snowpack near the falls. He slipped, plunging into the valley below, and was never found despite extensive searches. Locals say his spirit now haunts the waterfall, appearing in the mist to retrace the path he could not complete in life. Another version claims the figure is that of an avalanche victim, a climber swept away in winter storms, whose body was never recovered and whose presence lingers in the shadowed glacial canyon. Both stories converge in a singular warning: the mountains are unforgiving, and those who push too far beyond their skill or respect may leave more than memories behind. Visitors who approach Spectral Cascade describe an eerie, almost surreal quality to the falls. The glacial waters tumble over jagged rocks into a deep pool, sending fine mist into the narrow canyon. Late in autumn, when the first snows have melted, the spray catches the low sunlight at certain angles, producing a shimmer that can take the shape of a figure walking along the ledge behind the falls. Guides warn that these optical effects are heightened by the canyon's steep walls, which bend and amplify light, shadows, and reflections. But for many, the phenomenon feels more than visual trickery. The figure is said to move with a purposeful gait, pause as if looking toward approaching hikers, and vanish just as it seems within reach. Those who have seen it report a chill in the air, a sudden quietness in the canyon, and a sense of being watched, as if the mountains themselves are aware of each step taken. The surrounding landscape reinforces the haunting impression. Narrow ledges, jagged boulders, and glacial debris make every approach dangerous, requiring careful footing and respect for the terrain. The canyon walls rise sharply, funneling wind and water into narrow channels that amplify sound. The roar of the waterfall echoes like voices or murmurs, blending with the natural whistle of wind over rocks and ice. Trees are sparse at these altitudes, but alpine shrubs and mosses cling stubbornly to ledges, giving the canyon a green and gray texture that contrasts with the shimmering water. Snow patches persist long into autumn, cooling the air and adding to the ethereal quality of the mist. Even in daylight, the interplay of light and shadow, combined with the natural acoustics, can make the figure behind the falls appear to step closer, only to disappear when approached. Seasonal changes shape both the waterfall and its legend. Spring melt swells the cascade, increasing the force of the water and thickening the mist, making glimpses of any figure nearly impossible. Summer brings calmer flows, warmer light, and clearer paths. But sightings are less common, as the shimmer effect depends on the specific angle of low sun against lingering snow and ice. Late autumn is when the figure is most often reported. Water levels are lower, air is crisp and clear, and the angle of the sun in the canyon produces a spectral shimmer. Winter transforms the falls entirely, freezing sections of the cascade into icy stalactites, making the canyon treacherous and effectively inaccessible without specialized equipment. It is during the transition between seasons, when the ice retreats and the snow has yet to fully settle, that the stories of the Spectral Cascade's ghostly figure are most frequent. The psychological effect of the falls on visitors is notable. In a place where one's footing is never certain and natural sounds are distorted by canyon walls, the mind is primed to perceive patterns, shapes, and movement. Hikers often report the sensation of time stretching, the sound of footsteps echoing when they are alone, and subtle shifts in the mist that feel purposeful. Even those skeptical of ghost stories admit that the falls have a strange quality. The water seems to shimmer unnaturally. The ledges feel watched, and the canyon exudes a presence that cannot be quantified. For those who believe, the figure is a tangible reminder of the mountain's perils and of lives claimed by ice, rock, and water. Spectral Cascade endures in local lore because it embodies the frontier spirit of the Rockies. Awe-inspiring beauty, coupled with danger, where nature demands respect and failure carries lasting consequences. Mountain guides and longtime residents pass down the story quietly, emphasizing caution and humility in the wilderness. Hikers who return from the falls speak of shimmering mist, fleeting figures, and a haunting sense that the past lingers among rocks and spray. The legend also serves as a subtle caution. The mountains are not simply a place for adventure. They are a landscape where lives can be claimed instantly, where snow and ice are indifferent, and where water shapes both memory and myth. Deep within the rugged gorges and forested hollows of Appalachia, tucked away from well-worn trails and the hum of modern life, there is a waterfall that few travelers have seen, yet its legend has been whispered for generations. Locals call it Ekosong Falls, a name derived from the peculiar way the sound of its waters seems to carry through the canyon, bouncing off steep cliffs and echoing in ways that both fascinate and unsettle those who venture near. The falls themselves are not the tallest in the region, but they are dramatic, plunging into a deep, shadowed pool surrounded by jagged rock walls, dense hardwoods, and thick underbrush. What sets Ekosong Falls apart is the stories of voices carried by the wind and water, voices that seem to belong neither to the living nor to any human present in the gorge. The origins of these tales are rooted in a tragedy that occurred decades ago. According to local accounts, a sudden flash flood swept through the gorge, claiming the lives of several children who had been playing along the creek above the falls. The storm arrived with little warning, and the rushing water overwhelmed the gorge with terrifying speed. The bodies were recovered downstream over the following days, leaving a community gripped by grief and disbelief. In the aftermath, some claimed that the sounds of the children's laughter and cries had become embedded in the canyon itself, carried by the walls and echoed by the falls. Since that time, hikers and explorers report hearing similar sounds, particularly after heavy rain or sudden storms. When the water flow is high and the air is filled with mist and moisture, visitors to Ekosong Falls describe an atmosphere both beautiful and unnerving. The water cascades over moss-covered rocks, creating a continuous roar that seems to reverberate unnaturally along the narrow gorge. The mist rising from the pool clings to the surrounding trees and boulders, creating a veil through which sunlight filters in fractured beams, adding a spectral quality to the scene. Even during daylight, the combination of sound, shadow, and movement of mist produces an impression that the canyon is alive, attentive, and aware. Hikers often pause at the pool's edge, sensing a subtle shift in the air, a sudden hush in the forest, the faint sound of splashing not originating from the waterfall itself, or a whisper that seems just beyond comprehension. Many describe the experience as unsettling, though not always overtly frightening, as if the canyon itself is replaying memories that will never fully fade. The most commonly reported phenomenon at Ekosong Falls is the sound of children's voices. Some visitors swear they hear laughter, soft and playful, carried along the walls of the gorge in layers that seem to come from different directions. Others hear sobs or cries of distress, faint and fleeting, as if the canyon itself is mourning the lives lost there long ago. The echoes can be disorienting, as they often seem to follow hikers, shifting location as though moving with the observer. A few accounts describe hearing their own names called softly, though no one is visible. Even those skeptical of the supernatural admit that the acoustics are unusual. The narrow walls and angular rocks create multiple reflections of sound, and the rushing water can amplify certain tones. Yet the specificity of voices and the emotional quality attributed to them has convinced many that something beyond the natural is at work. The forest surrounding Ecosong Falls enhances its haunting character. Dense hardwoods of oak, maple, and hickory rise on either side of the gorge, their branches interlacing above to create a canopy that filters light into dappled patterns on the mossy ground. Fallen logs, ferns, and wildflowers cover the forest floor, while the jagged cliffs of the canyon trap sound and mist. During storms, wind rushing through the gorge produces strange whistles and sighs, blending seamlessly with the sounds of water, so that the falls themselves seem to carry a voice, the voice of memory, grief, and lingering presence. Hikers report a sudden drop in temperature near the pool, a damp chill that settles in the chest, heightening the sense that the canyon is charged with unseen energy. Seasonal changes influence both the waterfowl and the legend. In spring, melting snow and frequent rains swell the creek, producing more dramatic cascades and a denser mist that carries echoes farther. Summer brings clearer light and warmer temperatures, but also sudden afternoon thunderstorms, which often prompt the most vivid reports of ghostly laughter or sobbing. Autumn foliage reflects in the water, adding color and depth to the gorge, while fallen leaves obscure the rocks, increasing the sense of danger and isolation. Even winter, when ice forms along the edges of the pool and frost thickens on boulders, contributes to the eerie quality. The waterfall slows, but the echoes remain, trapped in frozen walls and whispering through snow-laden branches. The stories of Ecosong Falls are as much about human emotion as they are about the supernatural. They serve as a reminder of the fragility of life in the mountains and the memory of those lost in sudden, violent floods. Hikers often leave the gorge with a sense of reverence, feeling that they have encountered not just a waterfall, but a space where grief and memory have taken on a tangible form. Local families continue to recount the legend to each generation, preserving the story of the children lost to the flood, while adventurers, photographers, and folklorists share experiences of echoing voices that defy easy explanation. The mist clings to your skin. The roar of water continues even when the falls disappear from view. The ghosts we met tonight retreat into spray and shadow, but their sorrow lingers. Thank you for joining me on this journey through America's haunted waterfalls. If you've visited any of these places, or have heard local legends I've missed, leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear and maybe share them in a future video. If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss our next dive into the haunted wild. Until then, tread softly near misty edges, and remember, what the water hides is sometimes watching. Good night, and may your dreams be less haunted than the places we've just visited.